Good evening, members. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Council here at the Citadel. Some will be familiar with this as a venue for full council because we use this as a venue through much of the time work was going on at the Guildhall. So welcome back to the Citadel. Thank you for your hospitality. Please be seated. As usual, our meetings are being webcast so that residents and other members of the public have the opportunity to either see them live or to view on demand later. Today is Net Zero Day, and you'll see that we have introduced some screens for the digital display of our agenda this evening. This is a small step towards our ambition of achieving paperless meetings. But unfortunately, this venue doesn't currently have the infrastructure that would be necessary to support our laptops during a lengthy meeting, though I hope this evening isn't too lengthy. But it is nevertheless a direction we aim to make progress towards from here on. Let me say at this point that we are not expecting any kind of emergency, but if it should be necessary to evacuate the building, please make yourselves aware of the emergency exits around you and follow the instructions of the security staff who are present this evening. And so before I begin, I want to invite you all to observe a minute's silence in just a moment in memory of Derek Smallwood, former Lord Mayor, councillor, executive member, who passed away recently, and indeed his funeral was just this afternoon. The flag on the Mansion House has been at half-mast through the day, and I was pleased to be present, as were one or two others who are here this evening at the funeral this afternoon representing the city. Derek will be remembered for many things, but I think the thing he was most proud of was that he reintroduced the Christmas lights. Please stand for 1 minute as we remember Derek. Thank you very much. Thank you. I did bring a couple of copies of the service order from the service at the crematorium this afternoon. If anyone would like to take a look at those during the break, I brought those. May I remind everyone, as usual, to continue to behave respectfully, appropriately at tonight's meeting. I'd like us to have a good, productive debate, and I hope as many members as possible have the opportunity to have their say. I'd also like to remind members at this stage the guillotine will fall 3 hours and 30 minutes after the start of the main meeting, and I intend to have one break tonight at an appropriate point. We'll see how we go. That break for refreshments and comfort will be approximately 15 minutes. I have received no apologies for this evening's meeting. Do members have any apologies to report?
We have a full house, Lord Mayor.
That's remarkable. Thank you. I remind members and officers indeed to, if you haven't already, turn your phones off or at least to silent and mute other electronic equipment during the duration of this meeting. Just a note on the conduct of the meeting. before we come to the declaration of interests. Just to remind everyone that it's helpful to speak clearly during debate, to use the microphones, but please remember to switch off the microphone after speaking. Indicate, if you will, that you wish to speak by raising your hand. I will call upon you at the appropriate time. I don't guarantee to call all those who raise their hands because many items, as you're aware, will be within time constraints, but I will do my very best. So to help us keep through the business effectively tonight, please be focused, and I'll do my best to help us to do that. Declarations of interests. I ask all members who have a personal, prejudicial, or disclosable pecuniary interest in any item of business to be discussed at tonight's meeting to declare that interest now, if you haven't already done so in advance on the register of interest. I've noticed that there are at least 2 hands raised. Councillor Kilbane.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As item 8, motions on notice, as somebody that was instrumental in 7 companies that currently run bars in the local authority area, I will absent myself from the Get Me Home Safely debate.
Thank you. And Councillor Melly?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In relation to agenda item 8, the second motion titled Green Waste Collection, I have an interest in this item as the council appointed me to the Your Waste Board of Directors, but I've been granted dispensation to take part in that debate and vote. And then also in relation to agenda item 8, the third motion, Get Me Home Safely, just for transparency, I thought I would mention that I do work in hospitality locally, but I don't consider this, as something to preclude me from the debate or vote, because I don't stand to gain from anything in this motion any more than the many other people in a similar position to me.
Thank you, Councillor Melly. I haven't spotted any other hands. Oh, at the back. Councillor Merritt.
Can I declare the other registers for interest in that I'm a member of various environmental, transport and air-related organisations in the city who have an interest in the council plan and in the motion tonight.
Thank you. I think that's it. Item 2, the approval of minutes, and I ask members to approve, if they will, the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 20th of July 2023.
Councillor Rowley, Councillor Eyre.
Yes, a number of hands. Councillor Rowley first.
Thank you, Lord. But it's just a slight amendment. It's just a correction on questions to the leader. I asked a question in my capacity as the Armed Forces advocate. The leader is in fact the Armed Forces champion, not the Armed Forces advocate. I wouldn't in any way want to decrease her standing with the Armed Forces.
So then you've got Councillor Eyre and you've got
Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. A minor point on page 31, when it refers to the suspension of standing orders, I did actually speak on that item, and that has been omitted from the minutes. On a more significant point on pages 32 and 33, and there's been some consultation with the monitoring officer on this, the proposal that is mentioned on page 32 directly contradicts the resolution on page 33, which cannot be the case. I do believe the minutes should be amended to reflect that members understood that the budget amendment was Annex A, as per the resolution proposed by Councillor Lomas and Councillor Douglas, and that was what they voted on. I appreciate this will not change the decision. Executive made a further decision at their last meeting to ensure that the ward committee issue was passed that was included as Annex B. So it's not about changing the decision, but it really is important and vital that these minutes are an accurate record of what happened at that meeting, and that agendas are not changed after the meeting happened.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I have indeed given advice on this point. Members will recall that the papers that were issued for the previous meeting contained a document as part of the exec member for finance's portfolio. That document referenced a document labelled Annex A. There was no such document attached. There was simply a document attached marked Annex. So the document that we are talking about comprised of the report from the executive member, which had text and then a table, followed by an annex labelled annex, but was referenced in the papers as Annex A.
Councillor Rath?
Lord Mayor, the digital record that was available at the time, on which we have evidence of, clearly marks it Annex A and Annex B. The proposal was that council approve, quote, the proposed budget amendment at Annex A. That's what the vote was on. Therefore, the resolution at the bottom of page 33 should be amended to say that the budget amended containing the executive member report at Annex A. And I would ask that they formally ask that that is amended as such.
Can you bear with us for a moment? What anybody else does. It seems that on reflection, there's no objection to that unless that poses an issue elsewhere. That will be amended to reflect the point you're making, Councillor. I think there was another. No, okay. Otherwise, we're happy to accept the minutes. Can you just have a show of hands, please? I think that's fine. Thank you very much. The item 3, civic announcements. Let me just mention a number of things which highlight some of our international connections in the city. I'll mention briefly that I had a meeting with the Chinese ambassador whilst he was in York recently. I'm meeting very soon with the German ambassador. I've been doing a little to forward the relationship with Lviv. You'll remember that we embraced the opportunity of developing a stronger, the others all had celebratory certificates, but it was originally the assize of bread and ale. We have a number of events coming up, but I'll mention 2 in October. The Mad Alice Bloody Mansion House Tour looks like a fun evening on the 23rd of October. And the following weekend, the Sheriff's Halloween Ball at the Assembly Rooms. And I would be really pleased to see many members present at either or both of those charity events. Thank you very much. Happy to give further details during the break. So we come to item 4, public participation. We have 3 registered speakers tonight, just 3. Before we proceed with our speakers, I remind all public speakers and members of the rules relating to public participation set out in our Constitution, Procedure Rule 14.7. In exercising his or her public participation rights, a member of the public is entitled to express views positive or negative about the performance of the council, but must not say anything which is defamatory or discriminatory, make any personal attack on an officer, nor disclose confidential or exempt information, including personal information. That said, our first speaker wishes to speak remotely. After our remote speaker is finished, I'll invite our remaining 2 public participants to speak, if they wish, stay for the remainder of this evening's meeting. So I call on our first speaker, remotely, Phil Pinder, who would like to speak on the trade in the shambles and the effects of recent works. Mr. Pinder, are you able to join us?
Okay, I can hear you. Yeah, fine. Can you hear me okay?
Excellent. We can hear you. Do go ahead. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. So this is Phil Pinder. I'm owner of the Postman's Cauldron and founder of the Shambles Area Traders Association. It's Sunday I'm working away, so I was unable to speak to you in person, but obviously the seriousness of this, I thought it was very important I did address councillors. The council, as you may be aware, in their wisdom, have closed one end of the shambles entirely. This is, yeah, sorry.
Pinder, I'm really sorry to stop you there. It's only that we're not hearing you clearly. I'm not sure whether that's anything that we can address at this end, or possibly anything you can address at your end.
I will. Is that any better?
You've joined us by telephone, I understand, so it is going to be limited.
Okay.
Any advice we can offer?
We have a statement from him if you prefer to read it.
Will,
Okay, I'll try again. So the council in their wisdom have closed. Sorry?
let me just explain, Mr. Pinder. We'll happily start again with the 3 minutes. That's not a problem. If it proves that we can't hear you clearly, I do have your statement here, which I can read on your behalf. But by all means, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so the council have in their wisdom closed one end of the shambles entirely. This has resulted in lost trade. Bones found today will now delay this work probably into half term and beyond into Christmas. In addition, yesterday, the top end of the shambles was also roadworks started, and this has also restricted access further into the street. Today, the closures cost my business over 20% in lost sales, and this will run into tens of thousands of pounds by the end of the closure. Multiply this by the 40 plus independent shops in the street, and your officers are directly affecting the well-being and viability of businesses in the street. We've tried to reach out. We've offered viable solutions to keep the street open. For example, creating access through St. Crux. All viable solutions. No work takes place at weekends, and the surface could easily be covered with a steel plate to allow pedestrian access at this end. The simple gesture, while not perfect, would hugely benefit the trade and viability of many shops in the street. It is within your power, councillors, to open the street this weekend. Demand your officers do as you say and stop taking the word of officers as the only option. Stop being led and start leading. What is more important, the views and embarrassment of reopening would cause officers or the prosperity of businesses in our great city. I should alert you to the fact that a letter before legal action has been sent to the council from the Potions Cauldron. This action relies on a test case, Platt versus London Underground, whereas landlord, this action constitutes a derogation of lease granted, and you will be liable for losses for all tenants in the street that are tenants of the council and also affected by the closure. Thank you for taking the time. Now, please take some action and let's move forward on this situation and let's engage businesses instead of just ignoring us. Thank you for your time, councillors.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we caught the gist of that, but maybe not all of it. And it's helpful that we do have a script, which is pretty closely what was said. So we will make that available to members so we all have sight of that copy. I think that's the best we can do in the circumstances.
Thank you.
Waters.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you.
Chair, just
Thank
a
you.
point of order, if you've got that statement, would you care to just read it out for the 2 or 3 minutes it will take, just for clarity?
If members are happy to entertain that, and in fact we were less than a minute and a half, so I will read it. Mr. Pinder introduces himself, owner of the Potions Cauldron, founder of the Shambles Area Traders Association, and says, sadly, I'm away working, unable to speak in person. The council have, in their wisdom, closed one end of the shambles entirely. This has resulted in lost trade. To date, this has cost my business over 20% in lost sales and will run into tens of thousands by the end of the closure. Multiply this by the more than 40 independent shops in the street, and your officers are directly affecting the well-being and viability of businesses in the street. We have tried to reach out and offered viable solutions. No work takes place at weekends. The surface could easily be covered with steel plates to allow pedestrian access at weekends. This simple gesture, while not perfect, would usually benefit the trade and viability of many shops in the street. It's within your power to open the street this weekend. Demand officers do as you say and stop taking the word of officers as the only option. Stop being led and start leading, is what he said. Finally, what's more important, the views and embarrassment reopening would cause or the prosperity of business within our great city. Thank you for taking the time to read this. Now, please take some action. Best, Phil Proctor. Pinder, sorry, Phil Pinder.
Yeah.
Thank you. Our second speaker, who is physical, which is to speak on matters of governance, Gwen Swinburne, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I want to talk to you about the law, our constitution and respect. As a baseline, senior management and statutory officers should know the law and constitution, and as a minimum, follow both. In multiple episodes, we see current and long-term breaches of both with impunity. These breaches, many in Mr. Floyd's Central Directorate, are not recorded anywhere. Only when forced are they quietly corrected when pushed with zero accountability. In the past, an engaged media would have reported these. Now this rarely happens. Most of you won't have a clue how pervasive this is and how accountability at these most senior levels is as good as absent. Citizens and members are intimidated into silence, not being allowed to criticize any actions, even of the top managers. Members should not be taking the blame for these many legal breaches and administrative failings. Chief officers should be accountable and seen to be so, and we and you shouldn't be silenced. What is so frustrating is that many of these failings would never have happened if particularly the Central Directorate was effectively managed with transparent systems and processes, for example, more like North Yorkshire Council. North Yorkshire Council, in some regards, is an example of how we could do better. It has very many published officer decisions, including many significant procurements, waivers, grant applications, government consultation responses, many included in the forward plan, so we and members can see what is going on ahead of time, just as we should. Minutes are detailed with a proper record of debate. All members can speak at all committees without notice, not having to queue up for a 3-minute slot if there's one left. All members may have virtually all the pink papers and attend those discussions. Not so here. I could go on and on. Members are repeatedly told to respect the professional staff. Of course you should, but I don't see it going both ways. Members, we are supposed to have a corporate peer challenge this autumn. You need this on these issues urgently. May I ask—
30 seconds.
Thank you, Chair, Lord Mayor. May I ask Councillor Fenton to lead a scrutiny to set the challenge terms, not leave it to those who are so plainly letting us down. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Sorry I had to say all that.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted. I call on our third and this evening final speaker, Steve Lilly, who I understand wishes to speak to agenda item 8, specifically the motion relating to air quality. 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, I'm Steve Lilly. I'm Secretary of Claremont Terrace Residents Association, which is just around the corner, just off Gilligate. And I'm speaking in support of the second motion in item 8 this evening. In particular, I like the idea of the parallel development of the transport plan and the air quality action plan, which in fact you are to develop. The idea of doing that in parallel is really good. The reference to the urgency in the meeting, in the motion, is very good because it is an urgent issue. I'd like to thank whoever organised this meeting here this evening so that you could all experience Gilligate, all right, the Gilligate Canyon as we call it, okay, with the high buildings which hold in all the exhaust fumes, all right, so that in fact people here are experiencing levels of pollution up to 4 to 5 times higher than World Health Organization recommended figures. I thought this evening briefly I'd just speak to lots of my sort of fellow residents to get their view. Richard lives in number 23, he's a very fit man, tells me when he walks up Gilligate, by the time he gets to the top of the street into the town, he feels breathless. Jill lives at number 4. Jill's worried actually about the sort of traffic rising on the pavement. All right, it happens just outside these doors. Okay, and it gets worse, and the issues get worse when in fact we have large numbers of people coming up from the bus park. All right, obviously tourists coming into town, crowding the pavements. It is quite a dangerous place on occasions. 2 of our children, Seth and Thea. Seth says to me that in fact he gets upset because the ambulances can't get through. Okay, Thea is 4. She just says it's stinky, smoky, and very loud. Okay, Seth did a little picture. Okay, which you might want to look at later. Seth's dad, Rich, says he's really concerned for the traders because he can go down there, but basically the traders are here all the time. Okay, got an elderly guy who lives very close to me. He's got respiratory illness. Okay, he panics a lot when his inhalers actually sort of get used up. He actually calls 999. All right, thank you. Five times in the last year, 5 or 6 times in the last year, he's done this. Okay, and then Sam, teenager, lovely lad, all right, just tells me how he feels about it. He just says it's worrying and depressing. So all neighbourhoods have interests, okay? I think we have a particular one here, and thank you. All right, thank you. Can I, in fact, as you say, I can wind up. Can I just say my last thing? Okay. We'll respond to the consultation with some challenging ideas, and we would like you to consider taking those on board. Thank you.
That concludes the public participation this evening, and we come to item 5 on our agenda, petitions. Notice has been received of 1 petition this evening to be presented. The council procedural rules allow 1 minute to present a petition to council, so I invite Councillor Hollier to present his petition in relation to opposing cuts to the ward committee budgets. Councillor Hollier.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm presenting a petition on behalf of 1,050 residents calling for the cuts to local community funding to be scrapped. This funding was used to support locally chosen priorities, from help to address the cost of living crisis, improving local green and play spaces, addressing antisocial behaviour, or fixing poor road and pavement services. It's allowed local communities to have a direct and quick way to solve problems, and it enabled funds from elsewhere to be leveraged to help further. In my own area, our local food share project, which serves residents from across the city, is mostly self-funded on the back of the hard work of local residents. The occasional grant from the ward has removed roadblocks that might have stopped the project, such as when we were able to help them purchase an outdoor shed when space indoors became too tight. Without these grants, it might not now be the lifeline it is. Prior to the election, the Labour group were happy to triumph their use of ward funding in their areas and promised more of the same if re-elected. This petition asks Labour to rethink the cuts that break those promises. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, we might come. Mike.
I'll repeat that. In accordance with council procedure, the petition will be referred to the Customer and Corporate Service Scrutiny Management Committee. Thank you. Item 6, report of the executive leader and questions. So I invite Councillor Douglas to present a written report. You'll find this at page 25 of our council papers. Standing orders allow 5 minutes, 5 minutes for presentation of the leader report, and 5 minutes for any response from other group leaders. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Welcome to the Citadel on Zero Emissions Day. The Yorkshire Climate Stripes flag is flying from the Mansion House to mark this important day. The stripes are a stark reminder of the climate change we are all experiencing and the urgent need to reduce our carbon emissions to protect ourselves from its worst impacts. We as individuals can change energy supplier, choose public transport, reduce the amount of meat and dairy we eat. We as the council need to take responsible action too. We're drawing up a transport strategy that will enable York to make more sustainable transport choices, setting up a one-stop shop for home retrofitting and reviving the York Climate Commission. By working together, cross-party, city and region, we can bring about the drop in emissions that we need to achieve and create cosier homes, cleaner air and healthier lifestyles. Celebrating Zero Emissions Day is our clear commitment to a long-term sustainable and biodiverse city. The council plan I present to full council today was adopted by executive last Thursday. It's a collaboration between senior officers and executive members to align the Labour administration's election pledges with council policies and priorities, focused on delivering in a meaningful and visible way for the people of York over the next 4 years. The plans show our vision to deliver a healthier, fairer, more accessible and sustainable city where everyone feels valued. In partnership with our great city, the expertise and will to drive forward from businesses, civic society, world-leading educational institutions, and our amazing local communities. The plan, One City for All, outlines a host of activities we'll work together to deliver over the period 2023 to 27. Our core themes combine to give us the acronym EACH: equalities and human rights, affordability, climate and health. Through the customer strategy, there will be a laser-like focus to improve the customer experience of interactions across all council services, seeing a different way of doing business from the council. Engaged, listening, ambitious, determined, and financially responsible, valuing and delivering for everyone and taking our city onwards and upwards into the 21st century. I'd also like to point members to the annual corporate parenting report that is an annex to Councillor Webb's report. This is the first time this has been brought to full council in any form and reaffirms our commitment to our responsibility as corporate parents. I was very pleased with the recent Ofsted visit that highlighted the significant improvements made to the corporate parenting board and arrangements for care leavers. The report highlights the improved leadership and focus on the voice of the young person. The hard work and expertise and commitment of staff, the young people and adults that live and work alongside them is exemplary, and thank you to everyone for the hard work on that. The most visible topic concerning local government at the moment is the long-term impact of dwindling financial support from central government, the inflationary pressures on services and the increasing demand on adults and children's social care. Approximately 60 pence in every pound of council tax in York pays for social care, and very small amounts for the upkeep of roads, emptying of bins, provision of libraries, and the numerous other services the council delivers. The previous administration was not clear about the severity of these pressures on the council budget and spent one-off funds, including substantial amounts of important reserves, to plug the growing gaps. This cannot go on. I and my administration will be open and honest with you all. No more pushing the problem into the future. We must be collectively financially responsible and face up to the in-year cuts necessary to ensure we are not the Woking or Birmingham of the future, unable to meet our financial obligations.
30 seconds.
This is a critical issue for the people of York and one that deserves cross-party collaborative work. On a brighter note, none of us should forget that York has a great deal of opportunity. We've received the final wording for the order that will create the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority. This should go through final parliamentary approval in November and the combined authority created in January. This is the only show in town for bringing much needed investment into our region, and both North Yorkshire and York administrations working closely together to deliver the best opportunity for our city.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Do group leaders wish to respond? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Leader's report continues to extol the many benefits her administration has inherited. The Liberal Democrat Group welcomes the news you are advancing the local plan, and we can expect it to be approved in the coming months. This is a culmination of years of hard work by officers, councillors and stakeholders. I would like to extend my thanks to all councillors and officers, both past and present, who have worked to get us to this point. While the latest short delay is frustrating, I won't repeat the mistakes of the previous opposition and seek to portray this as some kind of secret plot to block the plan. It's also welcoming news that you'll be continuing to deliver other key projects you were lucky enough to inherit. The electrification of the bus fleet stands as a real legacy of the previous administration who secured the funding. We welcome the leader's call for all councillors to do all they can to promote bus use. This is, however, somewhat undermined by her decision to axe the £100,000 specifically allocated to incentivise the use of public transport and to protect the local network. Words and actions rarely align with this Labour Council. York Central and the application to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site are also part of the Liberal Democrat legacy. It's also refreshing to see the leader happy to perform swift policy U-turns, given only a few months ago she stated UNESCO would not be a priority for this council. Hopefully this report may go some way to softening the reputational damage that may have caused. On York Central, we still await more information of how Labour's pre-election rhetoric will translate to policy, particularly regarding access to the Railway Museum, the Riverside Walkway, and other issues previously raised by ward councillors. Then we get to the council plan. Your report claims you will progress areas that will deliver your election promises. This is not the reality of this council plan. You have systematically watered down ironclad promises that featured in every leaflet. On top of that, you are introducing stealth taxes in the form of green bin charges that were never mentioned in the election process. No longer can families expect a free school meal for their young children as they were promised. Your vow to ensure this happens for every primary school child has been dropped. Instead, most families who voted for this policy and a council tax freeze will receive nothing and have to pay an extra £40 a year for the privilege. 100% affordable and all council-owned land is now a commitment to increase the percentage of affordable homes. At the recent executive meeting, Councillor Pavlovich said he would reveal which sites. The answer surely, Councillor Pavlovich, is all sites. That was the promise. When can residents buy the extra affordable homes being provided at Burnholme? There is no reference to the promise to recruit neighbourhood caretakers for every ward. When will those job adverts go live? The council plan is just broken Labour promise after broken Labour promise. The report points to the council's financial situation. It states we can turn this into political football or be grown up about it and work out ways for making those cuts that have the least impact on those in most need. Despite the fact your deputy leader missed the memo around political footballs, how are your executive priorities protecting those in most need? Is cutting £150,000 to support those suffering cost of living having the least impact on the most need? Is cutting £100,000 for mental health and autism support having the least impact on those in most need? How about cutting £100,000 to support those with substance misuse issues or £150,000 from detached youth work? These are ideological cuts targeted at the most in need. They're counterproductive, axing one-off investments that deliver long-term savings. Your rhetoric has been as confused as your policies. Early press comments blamed inflation until it was demonstrated inflation is half it was last year. You've even tried to blame us as predecessors for using money set aside for post-COVID recovery to help people recover from COVID. Now you've settled on the argument that York is the most underfunded council in the country. This report rightly says we cannot pretend the problem doesn't exist, but that's precisely what you did in opposition. You didn't engage in the budget process, submitted ill-thought-out budget amendments, did not engage in financial monitoring, which showed you all what the financial forecasts were in the medium term, and made unfunded election promises. While use of one-off funding is not sustainable, neither is the answer holding on to reserves to inflict cuts on the most vulnerable. Reserves that, unlike other authorities, have grown year on year.
30 seconds.
Rather than protecting reserves, the council should be protecting the most vulnerable. What's most surprising is the suggestion that either the Labour government is not incoming in 2024, or if it is then, it has no plans to reform council funding and no promise to address York's funding gap. Rainy day funds are for rainy days. Perhaps, again, unlike a deputy's report, this is a tacit admission that a vote for Labour nationally is a vote for more rain to come.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart, do you wish to? Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll try and continue the positive tone of Councillor Eyre. Happy and upbeat. No, I mean, I don't really have a great deal to say, I'll be honest. If you said to me, talk about the past failings of the Lib Dem Green Coalition, I would talk for hours. If you said to me, talk to me about the City of York Conservative Group's great vision going into the election, again, I would talk for hours. But obviously, particularly tonight, I have to talk about the Leader's Report. And in truth, there isn't a great deal there in the best possible ways. It is a lot of apple pie and motherhood. It is a lot of good stuff. And we do see, as Councillor Eyre has said, we do see the watering down, though, I would suggest, of election promises. To cite just a few areas, free school meals for all primary school children. We'll see what does actually happen there. I think Labour are realising that was a really, really tough pledge to make, and we'll see what happens. Affordable housing on council-owned land. I mean, that's something that'll be great to see. We have a vast amount of council-owned land that just sort of sits there. So doing something more would be good with that. And you know, from the point of view of getting people housed, but also revenue-wise for the council. And the blue badge ban. Again, we wait to see, because the rhetoric of what was said on the doorstep wasn't said on the doorstep in Cottonthorpe, because no one from Labour campaigned in Cottonthorpe. But in other parts of the city, what was said on the doorstep is rather different to what's happening now. So in terms of the council plan, as we know, these things are all very well written by officers, and you know, if you were to disagree with parts of it as it's written, I struggle to see what you would disagree with. So we'll wait to see what does actually happen on the unrolling of things. I think on the devolution, I think that's a really, really key area, and I do welcome the fact that in my opinion, the leader and deputy leader are genuinely positively looking to engage in devolution. That's going to be huge for York. And I think over years, we've seen this world called York and this world called North Yorkshire, whether it be 6 district councils, whether it be 1 county council. And if we can work, you know, more across the council for everybody, that would be for the better. And then the final point is on council finances. I did notice there was a knot missing, and Councillor Taylor said I would never be so pedantic as to point that out, but obviously he was misplaced on that. It does say, I have no doubt that any councillor came into local government to make cuts to services. I think it's missing a knot, and if it's not missing a knot, then there's a bit of a shocker there. But we've had the talk of there is no money left this year. We had it last year. We had it the year before. We had it the year before. And I don't doubt that finances are tough. I genuinely don't doubt that. You know, but we've heard this before. I think what we've got to do as a council is we've got to be more sensible in the way that we budget. And I do think we have to move away from the tens of thousands here and tens of thousands there. We have to look at the multi-million-pound decisions. And one of the things that I flagged in the council in July was how, for all these, you know, terrible world, and how the world has so much changed from the Lib Dems to Labour, the Labour budget amendment or emergency budget was worth just a few £100,000. So we have to look at a deeper scale of change to see what can be done differently for the good of residents. And I'd certainly be part of any adult dialogue with Councillor Eyre, with Councillor Douglas about that, if we can help in any way that there might be. And just, I suppose, the only final point I just make is in terms of obviously the sort of, not directly on the report, but for me, there are so many flaws in the way we have council meetings and discussions. And I do think that we need to look at how approach the nonsense of how many hours we're going to have on motions. And obviously, we've had just 3 public speakers tonight, which is very, very light. But you know, how do those public speakers get responded to? So I think Phil Pinder, you know, made a very sensible point about shambles. And I think those sort of things will be good for, you know, people to get a response to. So that's it, really, Lord Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, Councillor Douglas, do you wish to say anything in reply? I will give Councillor Walsh the opportunity to speak. Is he entitled to? Not a group leader. He's not a group leader. Is there a point of order? No, you won't then. Okay. Councillor Douglas. No.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It really does disappoint me that Councillor Eyre is so dreadfully negative at a point in time when I think really our city and our councillors, our leaders, should be trying to come together, as Councillor Stewart has pointed out. We have some fantastic opportunities. We have a great set of policies that the city is really behind. We have a fantastic civic society who really wants to support what the Labour administration is trying to do. And yet we just get undermined at every opportunity. And I find this really disappointing when I've reached out to him to speak about some of these big city issues that are problematic at the moment. Councillor Eyre, do not shake your head at me, because I wrote to you recently and asked you for a meeting and you have ignored that opportunity. And it is very disappointing when we are faced with such difficult financial times. The fact is that we've got £18 million of funding in the BSIP awards that's come through to the city that will continue to heavily invest in the buses. And I'm actually really very pleased that Councillor Kilbane's activity and intervention with the providers has meant that we're not so reliant on subsidy into those routes anymore, because he's actually managed to get First Group to commit to taking on routes that are not commercially viable, which is something that your administration absolutely ignored and did nothing on, and it cost the city a lot of money. UNESCO, I've said publicly that it isn't my top priority. We've got far bigger issues at this point in time to be concerned about, and the people who are bringing the UNESCO bid forward totally understand that affordable housing, our transport movement, the local plan, the cost of living crisis are the priorities of the city. We're at one on this. I've spoken to them about what we're going to do moving forward, and we are going to progress with the application, but it won't be in a rapid turnaround. And in fact, I think if you know anything about the UNESCO project, then it isn't a rapid thing once you're on that tentative list. It takes a long time to bring an application forward. So please don't undermine the fact that I'm not committed to it in any way whatsoever, but we have other priorities at this point in time that the people of York have indicated are important to them. The Riverside Walkway, that is in design. We're moving forward with that. And also, I have to say, on the financial responsibility that you raise, one-off funding that you have been using, that's been doubling for the past 3 years, it cannot carry on. This is the financial situation that we are in now. We had reasonably healthy reserves 4 years ago, and now we have just about enough to cover what the Section 151 officer thinks is the minimum level that is safe for the council to hold. So we cannot go on having deficit budgets. That is the reality of it. And we are facing up to that. Whereas you came to every budget and told us it's marvellous, it's fantastic, nothing to see here. That is not the case. Yes, you did. Councillor Stewart, thank you for your positive and constructive comments. I really appreciate it. It's very interesting, isn't it? We find more in common across our, what people might consider to be great divide, but I actually find that you understand me and I understand you, and this is really very helpful. Now, on our pledges that we have committed to delivering, I would say, you know, none of this is very easy. We want to do it properly and we want to do it effectively for the city, and we have to do it within financial responsibility as well. I don't think anybody, whether that's councillor or resident, would be pleased if that wasn't the case. So Free School Meals, we've brought together the steering group that's going to put together
30 seconds.
A citywide campaign to get on with that and actually do the amazing amount of fundraising from our city that's needed. 100% affordable housing on council-owned land. We're on with it. We've profiled the housing delivery programme, so you'll hear more about it. Reverse the blue badge. Wait till October, it's marvellous. And devolution, yes, we do need to work together. North Yorkshire are keen, we're keen, we need to get the best out of it. So yeah, absolutely, I can't wait to work with you on it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. No, sorry, I couldn't hear what you're saying.
Request to make a personal explanation, it's covered in the Constitution. Yeah. Just to clarify what the leader said, I did receive an email from the council leader asking for a meeting regarding the venue for full council. I asked for that to be minuted and an agenda submitted. That request was declined. I've subsequently been told she would like to meet me about budget issues, which is a separate thing. Again, I've asked for that to be minuted, an agenda to be submitted, and I'm waiting for confirmation that it won't be held in secret.
Thank you. So I invite members to question the leader on her report. The council procedure rules allow 10 minutes for questions and comments. The leader may respond directly to any question asked or comment made, or may agree to submit a written answer if unable to respond to the detail. This will, of course, be circulated to all members within 5 working days. I've seen 2 or 3 hands. First I saw was right to the back there.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Can the leader please confirm whether or not every primary school child in York will be receiving a free school meal by the end of this council term, as per every single leaflet you put through every door in the city? Yes or no?
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. What we said on the leaflet was that every primary school child in York will receive a free school meal. We absolutely did. And we are absolutely committed to doing that. And we will do it over a period of time within the financial responsibility of the fact that we can't spend money that we haven't got. I think everybody in the room understands that. So what we're doing at this point in time is bringing together the city, institutions in the city, our large employers, our faith groups, our media partners who are very keen to run a citywide campaign for us. And we are building a campaign together that will actually deliver on this. And I would ideally hope that we'll be able to give every primary school child in York by the end of the term a free school meal. But I will not commit to spending money that we haven't got because you think it's a good soundbite. It's just not going to happen. So we will do it within our means, and it's a long-term project. And I will not tell you that I'm sorry for that at all. And I don't think the people at the back of the room will do either, the public that are watching.
Yes, Councillor Pearson.
Can I just take that as a no then, and that you are reneging on your election promises?
No, what I said is that we're working towards it, Councillor Pearson.
Councillor Hollier.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Sorry, Councillor Kilbane at a full council before the election stated that all the funding for free school meals was in place with a specific source of funding identified. What happens to that money?
Councillor Kilbane did not say that it was fully funded. What he said was that we have got some partners who have committed to giving us some funding for it, and we still have those. Those people are part of our steering group.
Councillor Clark, I think, was first to indicate for a further supplementary. No? Okay. Councillor Mason, is this a supplementary, please? There was three in total, as we are. Go ahead.
Just suppose, use the word fundraising earlier. Is there any concern about relying on that as a long-term source to make this sustainable? So we're not just giving it for 6 months and then having to pull it all back again?
We're going to have an ongoing fundraising campaign that doesn't just commit to fundraising free school meals. It's also going to be the York Fund that will allow us to deliver other projects as well. So you might have noticed that we don't actually have the money within the local authority to do this on our own anymore. And we are more and more going to be relying upon the goodwill of our city to support us to reach our ambitions. And that won't just be for the administration that we've got now, that will be for future administrations too. So you need to get used to the fact that civic society, our city, will be contributing to a lot of what we do for years that are moving forward from this point. So yes, it will be what we all are, I'm afraid, going to be engaged in. So get used to it, Councillor Mason.
Thank you. We've had the three supplementaries on that. So I'm assuming, Councillor Waters, your question is a different one, and then we'll come to.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Probably for the first time in 12 years, I haven't prepared anything to say on anything tonight. Which, I can understand most people would rather me sit down, but I just cannot listen to all this nonsense. I really can't. We're talking about council finances. Opposition parties are trying to blame government for underfunding and this, that and the other. Where are we tonight? We're in this building that we're hiring. How much is this costing tonight? Granted, it's much better than being in the broom cupboard for the last full council meeting. But why were we put in this situation? Why was a renovation project for the Guildhall that started off at £1 million in 2011, allowed to balloon to 25.5 million under the last administration that was spent. How many people, if anybody's actually watching this tonight, realise that that is now costing £900,000 a year for the next 40 years out of the revenue budget? And I'm going to ask if the leader agrees with what I've said at the end of it. So you can't.
Let me just remind you, Councillor Waters, that the purpose of this section of the agenda is we're asking questions about.
I will ask a question of the leader at the end of it.
Please.
I will ask a question of the leader at the end of it. The leader's report discusses council finances, and it's very appropriate that we are having to pay God knows how much to hire this room, thanks to your administration's incompetence over the handling of the Guildhall renovation project. I find it absolutely appalling that you can laugh about a project that's been handed over to York University to run on a very cheap lease, whilst the taxpayers of this city are paying £900,000 a year.
Councillor Waters, will you please arrive at your
cut out
question?
of services? Would the council leader agree that this is unacceptable for the city council, and certainly for opposition parties to be criticising yourselves on finances whilst we are having to meet that burden? And again, this is a perfect example of that burden tonight.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Waters. I think your question is longer than my speech, so let's go with some. So why are we in here tonight? The reason that we are in here tonight, and it is costing us £1,200 that we don't really need to spend, and it does irk me, to be honest, because what we are looking for is a fully accessible venue. And the Guildhall simply isn't one at this point of time, because blue badge holders can't get close to the Guildhall at the right time and actually stay parked close to the Guildhall for more than 3 hours. So that is why we are in here and not in there in the main hall, which would be a much better idea. So when we actually review city centre access, which will be next month, soon we will be able to go back there and it won't cost us anything. And trust me, we are in the process of trying to drive out every penny that we possibly can from the budget so that we don't eat into the reserves any further. And we don't have to even think that we might be getting towards financial unviability in future years. Not now, not next year, but perhaps the years after that. And the reason is that our reserves level are way down now, and it's just not acceptable. So I totally agree. And what we'll be doing, Councillor Waters, is reviewing all of the capital projects to make sure that they are on target. They're delivering on the priorities of the city, and we will have to review them because we simply can't afford it anymore. So thank you for the question.
I don't see a supplementary from Councillor Waters. Okay, I saw Councillor Rowley first, then I'll come to you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a supplementary with regards to hiring of venues. And obviously there's a cost to every venue that we hire that doesn't belong to us. And the council chamber sits there currently decaying. Has a feasibility study been done as to the cost that it might be to make that space fit for purpose? And if so, whether the costings would mean that it, overall in the 4 years we'd save by actually making that additional payment.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. No, I don't believe that we fully understand the cost of renovating the chamber yet. Of course, I think we can all understand it is a very precious resource and needs to be done appropriately. So I don't think it really takes too much to understand that it's not going to be insignificant, but it does need to be made accessible for everybody before we can move back in there. So We would dearly love to be able to do that, but of course this gets harder and harder as our budgets are stretched further. But yeah, we will let you know once we have had that opportunity. Thank you for the question.
We're at the end of our 10 minutes. For the sake of being even-handed, make it a very quick question and a quick answer.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for the open discourse, a long overdue open discourse about this transparent financial problem that we're in right now. I just wonder if you were able to explain, given the Liberal Democrat group leader's recent comments in the press, the difference between a one-off reserve expenditure the difference between spending out of one-off reserves versus not spending out of one-off reserves within a balanced budget, please.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Before you answer, I think you have a point of order, Councillor Mason.
I had my hand up for a supplementary, which was overlooked.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I didn't see your hand earlier. We're right beyond the end of our 10 minutes in any case. I'll allow the leader to answer this question briefly and then we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so if we don't set sensible budgets, then every year we have an overspend that has to be filled within year, or it is paid for from one-off payments. One-off grants, that's one thing, but reserves eaten away year after year, and there's one-off payments to balance the budget have been doubling every year for the past 3 years. So now, of course, we are getting worried. We took 5 million from reserves last year to put into balancing the budget. If it doubles again, that's 10 million. We're in trouble. So we need to take this seriously. And this is why I've asked to sit down and speak to Councillor Eyre about it, because I think it's something that he should be rather concerned about. But apparently he doesn't want to speak to me. Problematic, I would say.
Thank you. We'll move on. I invite Councillor Douglas to move on block the recommendations of the Executive Council from the executive meeting held on the 14th of September 2023, as contained in the minutes of that meeting set out in the Council's agenda and pages 1 and 2 of the agenda supplement.
Moved, Lord Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for this recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Kilbane.
Seconded, Lord Mayor, and could I speak to it?
You can.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak on this subject, but some of the comments that have come from the floor tonight, I think need to be responded to. I do find it odd from the old executives, Liberal Democrats, that they're saying that we've somehow reneged on our election pledges. And you know, I welcome the view as a Conservative leader that the proof will be in the pudding, because it will, and we will be judged in 4 years' time on delivery of those pledges. But what I thought I might do is just give you a handy briefing on how the council plan does relate to our election pledges, because I'm sure you wouldn't want to be accused of spreading fake news, and I'm sure you'd never twist the facts to suit a political narrative for your own purposes. So, and you know, obviously nobody wants us playing petty party politics, does he, when there's so much serious work that we need to do. So, just for your information, there are some new councillors in the room, and I'd like to welcome back some of the Liberal Democrat councillors from their long summer holidays. Hope you had a nice time. The council plan is actually a working document. It's not a political manifesto. It's a joint plan between the officers and the new Labour administration. It's not a political manifesto, but we know that the old Liberal Democrat administration did like to think of council publications as if they were for their own political benefit, but they're not. They're for the benefit of the residents and businesses of York. In other words, they're for the people who actually pay for the council to exist. So if you've got your pen ready, Councillor Eyre, first pledge: ensure every primary school child gets a free school meal. You go to paragraph 30, page 13, paragraph 2A1, page 10, in priorities matrix at the intersection of health and Not making no notes, okay. And affordability on page 12 in the what we will do section under 4.1 and in our key performance indicators that you'll find on page 46. And we thank the Liberal Democrats for their support tonight in trying to feed the children of York. Build genuinely affordable housing on council owned land, page 10 in the priorities matrix at the intersection of increasing the supply of affordable good quality housing and affordability. Page 54, what we will do, paragraph 2.2. Now, this is not an easy task, but unlike the previous administration, we do have the political will and drive to do it, and we will achieve it. Watch this space.
30 seconds.
Oh, well, I can't go through them all, but I'm happy to I'm happy to give you a list of where you'll find them. I can give you details for every single pledge and where it's cross-referenced in the council plan. That is a working document, not a political manifesto. And finally, I'm pleased to hear that tonight the leader of the opposition didn't resort to name calling like he did in his speech to the council exec. I'm sure he'll agree there is no place for bullying anywhere in the council, and I'm sure he would not want to be thought of as being a bully.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cobain. So we now have the opportunity to debate any of the recommendations. Please indicate if you wish to speak, and when called upon, please say clearly which recommendation it is you wish to comment on. Nobody. No hands. No hands. Okay. In that event, Councillor Douglas, you have 3 minutes to respond.
Happy that we move to the vote, Lord Mayor.
Okay. We're happy. We will move on. I'll take a vote on each of the recommendations. The first vote is on the recommendation in minute 24, which relates to the approval of the council plan for 2023 to 2027. Voting this evening will be by show of hands unless otherwise indicated or decided. Please raise your hands when I ask in a moment to indicate whether you wish to vote for, against, or indeed abstain in relation to this recommendation in minute 24. Can I ask you to bear with us and please keep your hand raised long enough in order to enable officers to complete the count. Thank you. So all those wishing to vote for the recommendation, please raise your hand now. Well.
So that's 28 to 4, Chair.
Thank you. Those wishing to vote against, thank you very much. Those wishing to vote against, please raise your hands now.
None, Chair.
And those wishing to abstain.
Voting, Chair. Okay, that's 19, then, Chair.
So thank you very much. The result of that is 28 voting for, no votes against the motion, and a total of 19 abstentions. That motion is carried. Well, rather, that's
The recommendations are carried.
the recommendations carried.
Let's do the same for the second round.
So with the second of those recommendations, again, same procedure. Those who wish to vote in favour, please raise your hands now.
Okay, so that's unanimous.
That does appear to be unanimous, therefore I don't need to ask if there are any votes against or any abstentions. Thank you.
Okay, so we are.
We'll move on to item 7 on our agenda, report of the Deputy Leader and questions. I call on Deputy Leader, please, Councillor Kilbane, to formally move his report, which is found at page 33 of our papers this evening. Councillor Kilbane.
Formally moved, Lord Mayor.
Having done so, I invite members to question the Deputy Leader on that report. Again, we have up to 10 minutes for questions and comments to the Deputy Leader. I saw Councillor Widdowson first, and then I'll come over. Councillor Widdowson.
Councillor Bain, it's a very straightforward question because we wouldn't want to possibly. It is on. Is that any better? Right, okay, very straightforward question. No party politics involved in this. In your report, you're saying that you're cutting £50,000 from gritting footpaths and cycle paths. Could you just let me know where that money's coming from? Or sorry, the impact of that of cutting it?
Thanks, Councillor Widdowson. Could you point to the part of my report where I say that?
Brutally honest about the financial position.
Well, you're honest about the financial position, and it is related in other papers that we've seen as well across the piece. So apologies, but it is £50,000 that you have cut from cycling and gritting, and I just want to know what the impact you think that's going to be.
I think, with all due respect, Councillor Widdowson, it's not actually a question about my report, but if you'd like to put that question to me in writing, I will give you an answer.
Okay.
Supplementary on that.
Is there any supplementary on that? No. Councillor Eyre?
I mean, it is relatively straightforward. You said you're being honest about the financial situation. You've honestly took £50,000 away from cycle lane gritting and footpath gritting. Can you articulate now what you think the impact will be in winter of not gritting cycle paths and footpaths?
With all due respect, Councillor Eyre, it's not in my report, and this is now the second question you're trying to ask about it. As I said to Councillor Widdowson, if she wants to send me the question, I'll answer the question. I can copy you in if you like, and then you can email me your supplementary if that works for you.
Your point of order, Councillor Lomas?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is a report by Councillor Kilbane on his position as the Deputy Leader of the Council, not his transport portfolio. So I'm unclear why you are allowing supplementary questions on an out of order question, because the question was about Councillor Kilbane's transport portfolio, not his position as Deputy Leader of the Council.
I'm not sure that I fully follow that, but in any case, we've, I think, dealt with that. Well, I think it is relevant to the report that's been presented. Councillor Nelson.
Point of order, Lord Mayor. There's a section on the agenda where executive members can be asked about their portfolio area. It's very specific. It's a
different part later in the agenda
process. So I think that's quite clear. So I'm sure that if Councillor Widdowson wanted to put that question again, if we do reach that agenda item, there might be an answer.
I hope we do reach that agenda item, and more like this. So if we move on, Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to thank you for noting my hand up, Lord Mayor. Deputy Leader, in the last full council meeting, you indicated that you intended to drop the report of the Deputy Leader element from the agenda of full council. I seem to remember you said something around this report being unnecessary and distracting from the rest of the work of full council. So I'd really just like to ask why you're still giving a report to full council. Thank you.
I'm not sure if that's a supportive question or not. Sorry. Okay, fair enough.
Are there any supplementaries on that? Councillor Stewart?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Conservative group regard Councillor Kilbane's report in the nicest possible way as totally pointless, and supported its removal and welcomed his comments at the last full council. It would be the last. It's very regrettable that we are wasting time with this report. And I'd just be grateful if Councillor Kilbane could articulate in his time as Deputy Leader how many people have requested his report be delivered. In his time campaigning in 4 years how many people have wanted to see the council report. And as I understand it, this report, rather than being a minor constitutional change by the monitoring officer, which could have got rid of this, but will now go to the Audit and Governance Committee. So can Councillor Kilbane assure us that all of the council officers who will be preparing the documents to go to the Audit and Governance Committee would have otherwise been doing absolutely nothing, and this merely fills up some free time that they had? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Do you wish to respond, Councillor?
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. I am feeling very loved here tonight because nobody has ever, when I've knocked on a door, say, "Oh, I read your deputy lead report and I can't wait for the next one." I mean, obviously, this is here because the previous administration was a coalition with 9 and sometimes 10 executive members, unlike the 7 we have here, and it was to satisfy the then deputy leader that belonged to a different party. But even that deputy leader didn't strayed off into the realms of his own. Into his own portfolio rather than giving a report on what he did as deputy. Because as a deputy, what I do is I support the great work that Claire does. I go to meetings with her and I deputise for her. That's the role that I play within the council, and I'm very happy to answer any questions about that. Unfortunately, it is true. We did, if the leader of the opposition had been in agreement, this report could have been removed from this section, and we could now be getting on with arguably more important business, though obviously I think this is possibly the most important part of the meeting, but arguably more important business. But the leader of the opposition once again refused to cooperate and is now insisting that this matter goes to full A&G with all the attendance officer reports and officer time, etc., which is just kind of the insular nature of this of the previous administration, really, and actually the insular nature of a lot of this debate tonight. There's an awful lot of navel gazing going on in this room, and I think it's about time we stopped it and got on with addressing the serious problems that the people of our city are facing.
I see no other supplementaries. Councillor Healy and then Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is actually a question about your report. Could the executive member explain how he calculated the 50 to 60 million pound shortfall in paragraph 3, as it's not obvious?
Sure, and thank you, Councillor Healy. And as a former Conservative and now a Liberal, I mean, it was you span both administrations that Liberal Democrat, to beg your pardon, both administrations that introduced austerity measures and ramped them up after 2011. So what that figure is calculated on is if the money that we receive from central government had continued just to keep pace with inflation. And we calculate that's been in the 30 to 40 million area. And then when you focus in the additional pressures that come from an ageing population, from more complex needs for children in care, etc., the uplift that we would need to cope with that gets you to the sort of 50 to 60 million mark. Now, I mean, the reality for our city is that we are trying to run a city 50, 60 million pounds a year short of where we need to be able to do it properly, and that's why your roads are crumbling. You know, that's why the city centre is actually in a mess and in need of quite a lot of work doing to it. That's why our social services aren't where they need to be. That's why we're spending so much money on out of area placements for kids that need it. It's kind of we are in a really bad place, and I think we all know that. However, what we're doing is we're looking for the opportunities where the money is. Okay, how can we raise the money that we need to get to make sure every kid in the city can have a free school meal? We're out there doing that. You know, we're looking at where we can get external sources of funding in order to make the city centre better. And we're not just relying on York Central and the devolution, which will bring some much needed money into the coffers. We're going out there to the city, and you know what? The city likes us, and the city wants to help, and they're really glad that they're finally being asked.
Any indication of supplementaries? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. At the bottom of the report, on page 1, you refer to the opportunities of devolution, and it's to that I want just to do a couple of things and then ask a very simple question. In 4 years as a ward councillor, we have asked your predecessor to attend ward meetings, and never ever did we get a reply to the positive. You never turned up. We asked you once and you turned up. So to your credit, on behalf of the residents of Dunnington, I thank you for that. As you know, it was a very, very well supported meeting, and we appreciate the help that you gave to us. I also want to acknowledge that the number 10 bus has been, for now, has been saved. What I would ask in terms of my question to you would be this: as you continue to work towards devolution, will you give a commitment that you'll continue to try and ensure that the rural bus services are maintained? And would you please try where possible to include ward councillors in terms of your kind of wider consultation? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley, and congratulations on shoehorning the transport question into the devolution bit of the report. There was quite a bit of work, and it was an absolute pleasure to meet your 100 or so residents that attended the wards meeting with yourself and Councillor Waters. Some great people there. Funnily enough, just yesterday, I wrote to the officer in charge of the network review to say, you are making sure that you're covering all the rural areas as well, aren't you? Because I do know that in the past those things can be missed. So devolution does offer a great opportunity for those services, because the mayor, if and more likely when they arrive next May, will have responsibility for that bus network and will have some of the cash that goes with it. So what we're trying to do and have been doing since we came into office is to make sure that we get more out of the bus companies, because I think some of them have had a bit of a free ride in for the last 4 years. They say, oh, we're going to pull the route. Oh, well, do you want some money? Oh, okay, we'll carry on then. Well, that's not going to go on. We are going to make the main city, the central point of the combined authority, the best place to operate buses in the UK, and they're going to be fighting themselves to come and run those services here. And to me, that means they need to be cross-subsidising those non-profitable routes if they want to play ball with us in York.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cobain. That takes us over our 10 minutes for that item of the agenda. So thank you, members. That concludes the questions. I'm just wondering whether, as we're close on 8 o'clock, whether now might be the time to take a break before we go to the motions on notice. That seems to meet with approval. So we'll take a 15-minute break, reconvene at 10 minutes past, or just after 10 minutes past 8 o'clock. Thank you. I think we have reconvened. Members, I've heard a number of comments during the break about the difficulty with hearing, especially those who are relying on the loop here. I've had a conversation to see what more can be done. I think there are limits on what can be changed this evening, but I hope it will make it easier if I suggest that for this second part of the meeting, we remain seated while speaking and therefore a little nearer to the microphones. And hopefully that will mean we haven't got our papers between ourselves and the microphone as well. If members are struggling still, please will they indicate, and if necessary, I'll just remind members to be closer to the microphone and to speak clearly. It wasn't just members, but also members of the public who I was aware had some difficulty through that first part of the meeting. So let's be aware of that as we continue. We continue with motions on notice, item 8 of our agenda. We have 4 motions submitted under Standing Order B13. These are included in the list of notices of motions and amendments contained in the agenda supplement. The first of these relates to improving York's air quality, and I invite Councillor Kent to move that motion. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I formally propose this motion on improving York's air quality, and I'd like to thank Mr. Stephen Lilly for so graphically illustrating the impacts of air quality, poor air quality and congestion on the people who live and work in Gillygate. Between 85 and 130 people die prematurely in York from human-made air pollution. This motion sets our ambition to go above and beyond our national obligations in our forthcoming Air Quality Action Plan number 4. United Kingdom national guidelines lag behind World Health Organization guidelines and behind the EU, whose Parliament voted last week to meet WHO targets on fine particulates by 2035. We have good air quality monitoring systems in York. We have the knowledge as to how to reduce human-made air pollution. I believe we have a duty to do as much as we can to protect people's health here in York and to lobby the government to do the same nationally. And I urge all councillor colleagues to support this motion. Thank you.
Second the motion, Lord Mayor, and reserves the right to speak.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to speak briefly in support of the motion, and in particular, the requests it makes around air quality targets and its calls on the government to adopt site-specific targets in vulnerable locations such as care homes, hospitals and schools. Just to add to the comments that Councillor Kent has made, nationally, a person is dying every 8 minutes from respiratory disease, and here in York, almost 16% of the health inequality gap for men is driven by respiratory disease, and 15% of the gap for women is driven by that too. And although we know that smoking and tobacco are one of the biggest drivers of that, and the work of the city's health trainers is doing good work already to help with that, we also know that air pollution is a significant driver of deaths, particularly around chronic respiratory disease. I also agree with Councillor Kent that Steve Lilly's points about the impact this has on residents in Gillygate was really strong, and this motion is extremely welcome, and I hope it gets cross-party support.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm happy to support this motion. First, the context. Most of us, I'm sure, including the Conservative councillors here today, will be gutted at the conduct of Rishi Sunak yesterday, rowing back on zero carbon emissions. Yet another Brexit so-called dividend, leading the way by walking backwards. Transforming transport and heating and insulation are about carbon emissions, but as has been said in the motion, they're also about cutting air pollution. It should not surprise us that those who are happy to pollute our rivers and seas are also happy to see our air polluted. Margaret Thatcher, no less, lectured her party repeatedly on its failure to tackle pollution in the 1980s. One benefit has been the fact that Rishi Sunak has managed to unite two completely disparate groups, all the conservationists and environmental NGOs and car manufacturers, which has to be a good result, and I hope that good things will come from it. But let's also recognise the local challenges we face, and we heard a public speaker explain the problems in Gillygate. I worked in Gillygate a long time ago, and I'm familiar with those problems. Many local residents expressed to me concern that so many of our senior management team live so far away from York and don't experience the services that they administer and manage. I understand that. Residents across the city and politicians all want to see action on cycling, action on public transport, a new local transport plan, a viable alternative to the car. I think we all want to see that. And sometimes it's hard to discern that action is taking place. We fail to draw on funding, on cycling, for example, because when we get money, we haven't spent it. And we fail to deliver the projects, and we don't develop shovel-ready schemes. I hope that's going to change. I've sat on too many meetings where councillors of all parties have expressed the desire to make things happen, only to be reminded that we receive £9 million from car parking. That's not good enough. We need to learn from best practice in other cities.
30
we
seconds.
need to earn revenue from measures that cut carbon emissions, like they do in cities like Nottingham that earns from district heating, or Dijon with its tram network, or Munich with its power station. We need to work with the combined local authority going forwards. So Lib Dems are happy to support this motion. I hope we can work together and make real change, reduce air pollution, and get this city working. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Vassy. Perfectly timed. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Vassy, for being quite constructive. It's very refreshing. I think it would be wrong of me not to say that we have a duty to the health of our children, and in particular the health and development of our children. And I was very happy to hear from the public speaker about thoughts and feelings of young people. I wasn't too happy to hear what they actually thought and felt, though. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but it's dirty, it's worrying, it's depressing. I thought that phrase of the canyon of Gillygate is well, it's dirty, worrying, and depressing. Children are at particular risk from air pollution. And I want to focus on improving that air condition, the part of the motion that refers to improving air quality around vulnerable locations such as schools. Their bodies, their lungs, their brains, they're all developing, and poor air quality has a huge impact on that. It can cause worsening asthma, heart and brain function problems. That there is clear evidence now of the link between poor air quality and the effect on our young people. We've got lots of primary schools near busy roads across the city and secondary schools. And I really think that this motion could go a long way to make a difference. So for that reason, I really, really support it. I'm glad that we brought it as an administration. I think it's timely, and I hope that we can work on as much of it as we can as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart, and then Councillor Merritt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this, and unlike most of the councillors who weren't going to speak, I don't have any typed notes in front of me of what I wasn't going to say. But I think I'd just like to comment further to Councillor Vassy's points. I agree with one part. I agree with Councillor Vassy putting on tribute the good work of Margaret Thatcher in this area. I think it's good that he put that on the public record. But I would disagree with him and his view on Rishi Sunak's speech yesterday, because I went into hearing that speech with an open mind, and people may not believe that, but I genuinely did, because I was a bit concerned that it could be a U-turn, and we want a consistent government, and we've broadly had that. But if there was to be a U-turn, that could be a bit unfortunate. But I do think that the crux of the Rishi Sunak speech was absolutely right. There is so much stuff in this climate change and net zero debate, which is not about taking everybody with us, And it's often about a significant amount of people flying around the world in private jets, but thinking it should be somebody else that's actually making the lifestyle changes. So very happy to support this motion, very happy to support every aspect of what's said, but how much are we actually making the difference here? You know, how much of these changes, I hope Councillor Webb's right, and I hope it does make the change, but for me, all I see is we're noting some things, we're writing some letters. I don't see what really we're changing air quality. Well, obviously, we're having the updated strategy, which seems to have drifted off from a few years ago. And it should surely be about how much we can actually tangibly change. And I think that Rishi Sunak, you know, did broadly get that right. That some of the things, you know, we're asking the people with the least money to pay the most money to sort this thing out. And we need to look at that, you know, more broadly on a net zero and air quality sort of point, because air quality is a massive issue. And one of the I was rung today by a journalist who was going from Westfield to Cottonthorpe, and they were talking about the fact that the life expectancy is 11 years. And it's amazingly stark. And I think Westfield is the lowest life expectancy and Cottonthorpe is the highest. And an amazingly stark difference. And one of the first things he said, why do you think this is? One of the first things I sort of thought of was obviously the fact Cottonthorpe is a rural area. And that's not the biggest factor. I'm not saying that is the biggest factor for a second. It's obviously, you know, far more significant issues about finances, you know, and health and everything like that. But this is one thing we can genuinely address. And so for me, it's about support this motion, but then we've got to just see how much we actually can drive forward and make the difference rather than just sort of say we should do things and write letters. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. This is an important motion for me as a Guildhall Ward councillor and representing Mr. Lilly and all the other people who live in Gilligate and off it, but also much more widely, because the reality is lots of residents are breathing poor air, and kids in particular, all across this city, and particularly obviously near roads. And if we're going to make a difference locally, to pick up Chris's point, then we will need to try and persuade a lot of people to try and do some of their journeys differently, to encourage them to move to electric vehicles, away from conventional fossil fuel based vehicles and so on. So I take what you say, and I hope if we pass this unanimously tonight, that will be an exhibit of how we can actually try and move forward together, and bringing people with us in terms of the changes that we need to make to improve air quality, to tackle the climate emergency, to tackle the difficulties of congestion and so on in this city that have such a deleterious effect economically as well. So I welcome the support that has been given on all sides. One thing I'd say to you, Chris, is we have a legislative framework that is now almost 30 years old. It is not fit for purpose, and that's a key point of this motion. If you can persuade your colleague, Mr. Sturdy, and he persuade his parliamentary colleagues to do something about that, there is a bill that has been agreed on a cross-party basis in the House of Lords, has cleared the House of Lords, and is waiting for a space in the House of Commons to try and tackle this issue, to implement quite a lot of the World Health Organization recommendations and standards, and to do what this motion would like to do more generally. I hope you can try and persuade your colleagues to give us a space in the House of Commons so that bill can go forward, and this motion is a means to encourage that.
Thank you, Councillor Merritt. Just a word. The custom is that we address each other as councillor, not by familiar first name. But other than that, I've not seen anyone else indicating they wish to speak on this. So, Councillor Kent, do you want to reply?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, councillor colleagues, for the cross-party support, which is most welcome. Just briefly to address your point, Councillor Stewart, absolutely, no one wants to just say words and not take action. Action is all. But the very stark reminder that we can do an awful lot of things here right now is if we look at the COVID experience. In the pandemic, our air quality was vastly improved. We've been on a steady trajectory of improved air quality across York since 2012, but we've stalled since 2020. 2020, the air quality in Gillygate and across all air monitoring stations in York met national guidelines. But since 2020, 21, 22, nitrogen dioxide in particular has breached those guidelines in key locations around the city, including Gillygate. And it's that kind of reversal that we've got to make. And I'm really looking forward to a cross-city involvement in the consultation on the upcoming transport plan. We want all citizens to voice their concerns and to give their views and take everybody with us. As you say, Mr. Sunak is trying to do, we want to take everybody in the city with us to have clean air, more active lifestyles, better air quality across the board. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. We move to the vote. I think we've all got an idea where this might go. But all those who wish to vote in favour of this motion, please indicate by raising your hand now.
So 46.
Okay, thank you very much. Those who wish to vote against, I take it therefore, Councillor Waters, you're abstaining. One abstention. With that one abstention, that motion is carried. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next motion, which is on green waste collection. I invite Councillor Widdowson to present the second motion. Please go ahead, Councillor.
Many thanks, Lord Mayor. I'm pleased to introduce this motion on green bins. In our 2019 Lib Dem manifesto, we promised that residents would not pay for their green bins. When we were running the council, we considered this issue a number of times, and we delivered on our manifesto promises and never introduced the charge. Why is it important to keep this collection free? Research has shown that when you charge for green bin collections, up to 45% of households opt out. 66,000 homes in York have their green bins collected, and this action would result in up to 30,000 opting out, and potentially 5,000 more when the city centre homes are offered green bins, as was reported in a press article this evening. The result will be more green waste and grey bins, more fly tipping across the city, arguments between neighbours as some will try to put their waste in other people's bins, and more car journeys to the tip, resulting in less recycling, increased vehicle emissions, and raised blood pressure. It also means that the proposed reduction in operational costs is at best fanciful. The council will be sending the trucks on the same rounds, but collecting it at every other house. How will that reduce costs? As we are all aware, we are experiencing a cost of living crisis, and this green tax is a charge our residents could well do without. I do believe Labour in their election manifesto promised to tackle the cost of living crisis and support residents in managing during these difficult times. Instead, what we're seeing is the introduction of a green tax. So I ask the executive to instruct officers to immediately cease work on this misguided project, which will increase costs for residents, harm the environment, and break Labour promises. I trust you will support me in this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Second and reserve the right.
I open it for debate. Councillor Lomas, you go first.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I am speaking against this motion, which will come as no surprise to the proposer, and I do have a prepared speech. This motion seeks to prevent the current executive from even considering something which we know was considered by the previous administration and the one before that. We even know, thanks to Denise Craghill's speech in public participation at the last executive meeting, that one half of the Lib Dem Green coalition was pushing for it. And it's therefore quite astonishing that the Lib Dems now want to prevent the current administration from even thinking about the options and risks relating to the proposition. And let's be clear, the executive decision that was made on the 14th of September was to consider charging for non-statutory services, including green waste collection. We asked for a full report from officers to come to a future executive meeting detailing options, potential risks, and the mitigations and potential benefits. No decisions have been made. We are in the position we're in financially for a number of reasons. Like all councils, we've seen funding fall way behind rising costs and demand for services. This started in 2010 with the advent of austerity imposed by the Conservative Lib Dem coalition government and has continued to have a huge impact on funding across all councils. York is particularly affected, having a low council tax compared to the region and being one of the lowest funded councils per capita. Across the country, councils are submitting formal notices that they can no longer set a balanced budget and are effectively bankrupt. Against this backdrop, we have seen reserves raided by the former administration to balance the budget at a rising rate for the last 3 years. And the current budget, set in February by the last administration, was full of overly ambitious savings that practically are never going to be realised. Last year, £3.8 million of reserves were used, along with the £1 million contingency, to prop up the budget. COVID isn't over, but our COVID funding is, thanks to the decision of the previous administration to use the COVID reserve to prop up their budget. Once reserves are gone, they are gone, but the budget holes that they patched remain. We have an absolute responsibility to set a balanced budget and to finish the year with a balanced budget. That's the reality. If we cannot do those two things, we will be the next council to issue the formal notice that says we cannot continue. I will not debate here the detail of green waste charging. That will happen in January and February as we consider the detailed report we've asked from officers and the wider context of the budget. Let us be clear, however, that we intend to do this in an open and transparent way. We will not hide the conversations. We will consider the information in public, allowing residents to understand the issues and give us their views.
3 minutes, thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Okay, excellent. I haven't seen any other members indicating they wish to speak on this. Councillor Waters, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I don't agree with what's proposed, I fully sympathise with how you're trying to balance the books. And I would throw it back to the last administration, a charge of £43 per household a year. How does that relate to the charge per household per year for servicing the debt on the Guildhall project? How does that relate to the charge per household per year for servicing the money wasted on the Castle Gateway project that so many of you lot actually fought to maintain both at executive and planning? How do you then sit here and criticise these people for trying to balance the books? Yes, it'll increase fly tipping. Yes, it's wrong to impose it, but you've left them no room for manoeuvre, have you? The money that you lot wasted over 4 years, 8 years, it's madness. And again, we're sat here tonight in this room that's had to be rented at huge cost to York taxpayers because of your decisions in the past. It's crazy. And all this arguing and this to-ing and fro-ing, where does this get anybody? And I would throw this back to yourselves as the new executive. Why we're debating motions that mean nothing? Why we had the deputy leader's report when you said you'd scrap it? Just get on and scrap all this, scrap the motions and actually deal with council business on a full council meeting when that's what the public of York would fully expect us to be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other members wishing to speak on this? That being the case, Councillor Widdowson, do you want to reply?
No, we can just move to the vote, please.
Okay. We will move to the vote. So those who wish to vote for this motion, please indicate now by raising your hands. Sorry. Thank you very much. Those who wish to vote against this motion, please indicate now.
24 against.
Thank you. And those who wish to abstain?
That's one.
So that was 21 votes for, 24 votes against and 1 abstention. That motion is not carried. We move on to the third motion before us this evening. I invite, well, before I invite Councillor Myers, I understand in moving this motion that he's happy to seek Council's consent to incorporate the amendment from Councillor Fenton. Is this correct?
Yes.
And is Council happy to agree to that?
Yeah.
There we are. That makes things much easier. So I now invite Councillor Myers to move the amended motion on getting home safely. Thank you, Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm pleased to propose this motion this evening, which asks for Council to support the Unite the Union campaign, Get Me Home Safely. And I draw members' attention to my public register of interests as a member of Unite the Union. Lord Mayor, this is a campaign to make our communities and workplaces safer. Employers, local authorities, members here, and the government, no less, can all play their part. York, as we know, has a large hospitality sector, and we welcome more than 8 million guests a year, spending more than £700 million in the city and supporting more than 24,000 jobs. To support this workforce, we need to extend the duty of care to embed safe transport home policies for all workers. And I call on all employers to adopt risk assessments that include an individual's journey times and potential hazards once they've left their workplace. In terms of licensing, we need to assess and review new applications for licenses through a lens of the employer's duty of care and their staff transport home policies. The City of York should request this of the hospitality sector. Our residents do so much to support the city's economy, and for it to prosper, working people need to receive better dividend from their city, and this is just one small way to go towards that. Lord Mayor, turning to transport, we need to lobby bus operators for mandatory training for transport workers on gender-based violence to include practical guidance on reporting sexual harassment and assault on public transport. We need to publicly call for and lobby the government for municipal ownership of buses as a way to tackle the chronic shortage of night services. Since 2009, more than 3,000 national bus routes have been cut or reduced. Taxi and private hire reform is long overdue. We need national minimum standards to improve safety for women using private hire vehicles and taxis. We need an end to cross-border hiring so that taxis are licensed in the area they
30
start
seconds.
or finish a journey in.
Sorry.
That's okay. I won't go on all night, I promise you. I've just got a couple of bits more and I'll move towards the 5-minute mark, but not over it. Lord Mayor, we should also write to the city's 2 members of parliament to express our support for this campaign, as ultimately many of the aims regarding the employer's duty of care, public transport funding, bus services, minimum standards for taxi and private hire vehicles can all be achieved with their backing, and not to mention the urgent action required on the shocking level of enforcement of sexual assault crime. Lord Mayor, to conclude, I am really proud to be proposing this motion to Council. I trust that members across Council will support this motion and, crucially, work with me to ensure that its aims and principles are achieved so that working people in York have access to safe transport at all hours of the day, and that the duty of care of York's employers extends to ensure their workforce gets home safely. I invite debate, comment, contribution, and ask for members to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. That was 4 minutes. Do I have a seconder for this motion?
Councillor Baxter.
Councillor Baxter, do you wish to speak? 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Council, I'm sure many of you, like me, got their first job in hospitality and experienced the uncertainty of getting home at night. For many workers, but especially young women, there is a constant worry about safety, and that's why I'm supporting this motion. The motion calls for the basics, something that everyone deserves no matter your job. However, hospitality workers are often overlooked. Young women make up a large part of York's population and contribute a lot to the city. However, they often have less rights at work, less safety and lower wages. With the increasing cost of living and more students taking up part-time jobs, we need to protect them now more than ever. It is wrong that the profits of a company are put above the safety as workers. This motion calls for workers to be protected and supported, and I would urge all members to vote in favour of this motion. Thank you.
So I'm looking for hands if you'll indicate if you wish to speak.
Councillor Rowley.
Yeah. I'll start with Councillor Fenton, then Councillor Rowley. And then
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Myers for agreeing to accept my amendment. Those of you who were around last October will remember a motion on bus services that I proposed and was happy to incorporate a Labour amendment. And so in my amendment to Councillor Myers' motion, I've tried to use the same or as similar as I could make it, wording that's consistent with the wording used last year. And I'm pleased that's been accepted. Thank you. In large parts of the rail sector, we've seen de facto renationalisation in order to protect and hopefully improve services for passengers. It seemed increasingly odd, therefore, that local authorities remain currently prevented from setting up bus services if they decide that that can best meet local needs. The tide of opinion does seem to be changing, however, and I'm pleased that at the Lib Dem Party conference next week, there will be a debate on a policy proposal that would commit the party to reversing the ban on local authorities setting up their own bus companies and also simplifying the franchise application system. The availability, reliability and affordability of bus services is obviously crucial in enabling people to get to work, to education, to appointments safely and sustainably. We're obviously not helped by the fact that bus fares have risen across England by 89% since 2005, and a quarter of bus routes outside of London have been cut in the last 10 years. I would encourage members to support the campaign and this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to reiterate that the Conservative group will support this motion, and we welcome it being brought to council. Lord Mayor, you may recall that some 15 years ago, yourself and myself were involved in setting up street angels in York under the auspices of One Voice York. And street angels still continue to be part of the nighttime economy and caring for those that maybe have a few too many sherbets, shall we say. And for many years, I was an active street angel. And some of the frustrations that we had was we could look after those people that had become worse for wear. We were able to find family members or get them back to their accommodation within the city walls. However, once they wandered outside of the city walls, there was very little that we could do. One of the absolute no-go areas for us as street angels was taking vulnerable people home. We had a very strong, robust safeguarding policy. And I would just urge, in terms of this particular motion, the importance of ensuring really good, robust safeguarding policies, particularly with regards to lone workers, to taxi drivers and the like. So support this motion. I'm very happy to do so, but just with that caveat of ensuring that there's robust safeguarding in place.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. Councillor Street Marshall.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the Get Me Home Safely motion. Having lived in the City of York for over 20 years and having worked in hospitality and now having younger family members working in hospitality, I fully support this motion. Walking around the city at night alone can be an anxiety-inducing experience, and this can be increased with York's layouts of many alleyways, snickleways, riverside paths, where you can find very few or no people around. Women are 5.9 times more likely to be assaulted and 13.6 times more likely to be raped than men. The figures for sexual violence in Yorkshire remain higher than average for England and Wales, with the national rates of assault on men and women at 63.4 per 100,000 people, compared to 66.3 in Yorkshire. And for figures covering York alone, data from the Office of National Statistics shows that North Yorkshire Police recorded 625 sexual offences in York in the year to September 22, up from 456 during the previous 12 months. This is a shocking increase and the highest figure since records began in 2007. It shows evidence of a sharp growth in sexual crimes. We should also take into account that reporting figures for sexual assault are really low and only 2% of sexual harassment is estimated to be reported. This may be for a multitude of reasons, but the fact remains that reporting of sexual-based violence is low and figures are likely to be a very large underestimation. York's a city with a large population of nighttime workers who may be working shifts, including factories, care, retail, cleaning, hospitality. People working in these industries are often lower paid, and I know from personal experience risks are taken when choosing whether to walk home or perhaps spend £10 on a taxi. People should not have to make decisions between safety and having money for necessities. If late night workers are able to get home at no cost on public transport, they're likely to feel more confident in doing their job and getting home safely afterwards. Lower paid workers shouldn't be compromised financially or in their safety in order to provide services to other people enjoying the city. The York Purple Flag Working Group objectives are for York to be a safe, welcoming and considerate city. Requesting officers and partners to implement aims of this motion in order for there to be an emphasis placed on the safety of staff as well as visitors to the city is crucial if we are to encourage and support positive experiences of York. I hope that councillors can fully support this motion and the work it will involve between the Purple Flag Working Group, Licensing Committee and transport providers in order to make hardworking staff safer and increase their confidence and well-being as they provide services that greatly contribute to the economy of York. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hook, then Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I support the Getting Home Safely campaign, but for residents in some of the more rural parts of the city, their ability to get home at all is a serious concern. Many villages in York and most in my ward, rural West York, do not have nightly and weekend services as it currently stands. And many vulnerable residents in these parts of York do not feel safe taking a taxi alone to and from the city centre. And indeed, the taxi fares to the more rural parts are very expensive too because of the distances involved. In June, council officers made a last-minute decision to allocate £36,400 to keep a number of services running for 3 months after First York had planned to axe them from the 2nd of July. This included all weekday evening services to and from Poppleton and Dunnington after 6:30. Councillor Rowley seems to know about what's happening to the number 10 service, but we in Poppleton don't, because we haven't yet seen a published officer decision, and we're really concerned about that. So we would ask for that, and we would then welcome any input that Councillor Corbane could make to help the rural services also be built up to. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I wouldn't have spoken on this. I would have quite happily supported it, but my ears pricked up when Councillor Mayers mentioned about taxis and taxi licensing. It just amazes me that everybody's going to vote this through. And nobody refers to how robust the council is with dealing with rogue taxi operators. You'll have to forgive me if my memory's not correct, but I think February 2021, there was a 4-hour meeting of the York Licensing Committee when the decision was taken to revoke the licence of what I would consider a rogue taxi operator. There was some quite harrowing evidence given by people that had been in taxis with this operator. There was £20,000 plus of council taxpayers' money spent on a barrister to advise the committee. And a decision was reached to revoke that taxi operator's licence. We go probably 14 or 15 months later, and the council's legal department bottled the decision. No other word for it. They bottled it. That rogue taxi operator is still operating now. What comfort, what confidence can anybody have in people trying to get home safely at night when decisions like that are made by this council? So, fair enough, approve this, but just realise what's going on in the background.
Thank you. And no other members have indicated they wish to speak. Councillor Myers, do you want to reply?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, members, for contributions. Just really briefly say, hope to win your support, Councillor Waters, and make it unanimous. You raise a really important point about the aims and principles of this motion. For them to be delivered, I've got courage and determination to see that through. I ask that all council members understand fully what you're voting for, specifically in terms of the licensing resolutions, and show the same courage and determination when it comes to putting the aims and principles of the motion into your work on day-to-day committee. So we've sat on licensing committee before, Councillor Waters, where we've shared similar views, and I expect with a unanimous vote that council officers hear full council's call. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. So we'll see what that vote is. Those who wish to vote in favour of this motion, please indicate now. I'm sure that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, members. Our next motion, supporting people living with epilepsy. I invite Councillor Fenton to move this fourth and final motion this evening, supporting people living with epilepsy.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm pleased to propose this motion, which seeks to give some visibility to why people with epilepsy can find themselves disadvantaged in terms of finding and returning employment. The facts and figures in the motion speak for themselves. The motion asks executive members to use any and all opportunities to work with the city's employers to raise awareness about what more can be done to support people with epilepsy into work, and also to ensure that the council is doing all that it can to be an employer that supports staff who live with epilepsy. People with epilepsy have protection from discrimination under the Equality Act, even if their seizures are controlled or if they don't consider themselves to be disabled. Under the Act, you don't have to disclose to an employer that you have epilepsy. However, if you do, they can and must make sure that they treat you fairly and avoid various forms of discrimination. And it's here where there's room for improvement. Many people who have epilepsy choose not to disclose the condition to their employer. This might be for fear of it hindering their chances of advancement within the organisation, or being met with an uninformed response, or just deciding that if their seizures are controlled by medication, to keep quiet. There is support and information available for employers, for example, from the Epilepsy Society, which highlights the importance of employers avoiding making assumptions and taking steps to create an environment in which employees feel more able to talk to them about what their epilepsy is like and how it might affect the scope and structure of their work. Underpinning all of this is a need for a broader societal change so that people with epilepsy feel more able to talk about the condition without fear of being judged or discriminated against. I was diagnosed with photosensitive epilepsy as a teenager and didn't feel able to talk about it for fear of how people might react. I was fortunate in that medication helped to bring the seizures under control, but many people have to deal not just with the active condition, but also other people's reactions, perceptions and prejudices. So it's no wonder that many people don't feel able to be open about their epilepsy. If we can make a start locally by raising awareness with employers, signposting to available information and support, and dispelling any fears and misunderstandings that might exist about the condition, that seems to me like a worthwhile thing to do. So I would ask colleagues to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for this? Go ahead, please, Carol. Councillor Runciman.
Well, there's only one Carol. Thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm pleased to second this motion, which seeks to raise awareness and secure better opportunities for people living and working with epilepsy. Many people with epilepsy and, of course, other long-term conditions are disabled by society's response rather than by the condition itself. This happens in their employment, where data shows there is not currently equality of opportunity for those with epilepsy. This needs to change, and it is right that City of York Council should use its influence and connections to improve the situation. There is a lot of support and information already, as my colleague has said, such as that from Epilepsy Action. There are useful resources about looking for and staying in work with epilepsy. Improving awareness and understanding is the key. Research by the Institute for Employment Studies found that one of the biggest barriers to employment was a lack of understanding. Many employers think that people with epilepsy have tonic-clonic seizures and were unaware that many seizures are controlled with medication. They also thought that the majority of people with epilepsy would be photosensitive, despite the fact that only 3 in every 100 people are. As part of the research, many employers said that witnessing a seizure would be distressing. Employees might not know what to do, but they need prior training. Findings in a 2016 poll were that a quarter of respondents would be concerned about working with somebody with epilepsy, and 63% said it was because they had no idea what to do if there was a seizure. St. John's Ambulance says that 29% of people are very confident of using first aid skills in an emergency. So I was pleased that earlier this month, on World First Aid Day, St. John's Ambulance encouraged people to learn simple life-saving skills, including how to support someone with a seizure. The Epilepsy Society has a simple message, and I will say it to everyone here: calm, cushion, core. It's very simple, it's very clear. They hope that the 3 easy to remember words will give members of the public confidence to help someone. Finally, this is a first step, but there's a lot more to do, particularly understanding the condition in the workplace. I would urge members to support the motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Runciman. I invite debate. Who please go ahead.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm speaking in support of this motion. Disabled people with all different types of impairments, including epilepsy, also struggle to find work and are more likely to be unemployed than non-disabled people. Generally, disabled people are underemployed. The disability employment rate was 52.6% in July to September 2022, compared to 82.5% for non-disabled people. That's July 2023's figures. Issues around fear, stigma, and not understanding the rights of disabled people need to be addressed as a matter of urgency to redress the balance. It is also vital that suitable work is available with work that matches qualifications of the disabled person. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Councillor Stewart and then Councillor Kilbane.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I very much welcome this motion for two reasons. First of all, as a Conservative, I want to see everyone better themselves, and I welcome the improvements in Councillor Fenton's motion writing from the last full council, where he picked the political football of potholes, slated everything the Conservative government had done, praised everything the Lib Dems had done, slated everything the Labour administration had done, praised everything the Lib Dems were going to do in the future, and then looked like a puppy with a toilet roll as he said, I didn't know my motion would be controversial. So I think it's a great step forward that we're here, because this really does matter. This is an excellent motion, and I think it's a really, really important issue. And the reason I think it's important is because lots of us know lots of people with epilepsy, but far more than that, lots of us don't know that we know lots of people with epilepsy. Because of all medical conditions, epilepsy seems to be the one that entirely wrongly is regarded by people as embarrassing and something they should keep quiet. And all of the people I think that I know have epilepsy, I found out for a particular reason. They couldn't drive because of a fit or other very specific issues. And one of those particular people is my partner, and she has epilepsy, or as she described it in the early years of our relationship, she had epilepsy and it was definitely cured and everything like that, but she's on medication for it. Her story is that she was in New Zealand scuba diving and had a fit. And I had a stroke a few years ago, so as she diplomatically puts it, we're very similar because both of our brains exploded. So, you know, that's where we're sort of similar. But people do hide from it when it's such a difficult area and there is such a vast amount of things that can be done, but they're made all the more difficult to know when people don't talk, you know, about epilepsy. And I think that's what this motion starts us on a journey of in a really, really good way. It's the two areas of what can the council do with other employers and what can the council do as an employer. So very much welcome this. I did actually email Councillor Fenton and say, I genuinely think this could benefit from being looked at by scrutiny. That's something I would very happily serve on in any way could be, because I think real value could be added. I didn't put it in as an amendment because going to scrutiny at a full council motion is generally kicking it into the long grass and all that sort of thing. But I think that's something that could certainly be well worth considering. But to put this on the agenda and to see what we can do for those, you know, I don't know, it's dozens or hundreds of people at the council that we employ have epilepsy or further afield. You know, there's a vast amount we can do, but also just putting it on the record and saying this is in no way whatsoever anything that can people should be ashamed of. It's one of the things that there are things that people can do, and I'm not an expert. I don't want to sort of I don't suffer from epilepsy, so I don't want to talk like any sort of expert, but there's fewer things that you can possibly do on it. So get this on the record and see what we can do. I think is a great thing and very much support this motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kilbane.
Thanks, Lord Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Fenton, for bringing this motion. I will be brief because I'm really pleased with the progress that we're making through the agenda tonight. I think the stats that you bring to our attention are really bring it home. And as the one of the executive members, the asks are in the council resolves, we're very, very happy to support that. And I'm also speaking there on behalf of Councillor Lomas, who's the other member, or Katie, as the Lord Mayor calls her. So what I would like to just add to it really is that the way that we tend to work with these motions is that we would prefer to work alongside advocacy groups or disabled rights organisations. So as well as the business organisations that you mentioned in the asks, then we'd like to extend that to make sure that our first port of call is people living with direct lived experience. Because I don't know how many of you know, but people in the disabled community call people who don't think they're disabled tabs. Has anybody come across that acronym before? No? Temporarily able-bodied? Because that's all of us, really. You know, at some point in our lives, we will no longer be able-bodies, and epilepsy is something that can make that happen unexpectedly and maybe sooner than you thought, and indeed can happen at any point in your life. So very happy to support the motion with that proviso of sort of working alongside sort of disabled rights organisations and advocacy groups. And yeah, thanks for bringing it.
Thank you, Councillor Kilbane. Councillor Mason.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I hadn't planned to speak and definitely don't have any notes, but I just wanted to say for someone that works with young people on a daily basis, how important I think this is in terms of their futures. I think sometimes when young people get diagnosed with epilepsy, it can be shattering, particularly if they're thinking about driving, thinking about going to university. I think anything we can do as a council to show that employers are supportive of people with epilepsy and that there's a future for them. It isn't the end of the world if they are diagnosed with epilepsy, I think is very important. The last thing I'd like to say is I'm very pleased as the chairman of St John Ambulance in North Yorkshire to thank Carol for raising that, but it's St John Ambulance, and I'm afraid that's a bit of a pet peeve. Thank you.
Thank you. And no other members have indicated. Councillor Fenton, do you wish to reply?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for colleagues for their words of support. Fully take on board Councillor Kilbane's comments around making sure that in discussions with employers and within the council that people with lived experience advocacy groups are involved, because they can tell their story, which you can read all the parliamentary reports and studies, and there are lots of statistics, many of which have been mentioned this evening, but talking through someone's personal experience of looking for work, maintaining work, really, it's certainly very powerful, and certainly my experience has helped me understand other people's epilepsy far better and understand the challenges that they face. And it's really about creating an environment in which people feel able to be open and honest with those around them. I'm sure other people with epilepsy, whichever situation you go into, you always look for a corner. You always look for a space where, if you have a seizure, where can I go to have a lie down, let it run its course? And in a social situation, in a work situation, you shouldn't really have to do that. There should be a lot more support, but that it's up to not just employees, but people who live with epilepsy to speak up, and it's creating an environment in which that can happen. So thank you very much for your support.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Fenton, you spoke of your own personal experience. Councillor Stewart, you spoke of your partners, I'm sure with complete consent. But I would just make the point to all members that when speaking of experience, we just need to be careful when speaking of others' experience that we do so with their consent. I'm sure you do, Councillor Stewart, but I just wanted to take the opportunity.
Can I just add that when I discussed it with my partner, she did say she would like to come along tonight to give her experience and answer any questions. And I did have to explain that wasn't quite how full council works, but she was certainly enthusiastic about a story being told.
So we move to the vote. Those who are in favour of this motion, please, would you raise your hands now? Again, unanimous, Lord Mayor. I'm sure it's unanimous, yes. Thank you very much. That motion is carried. So with that, we've concluded the motions, and we move on to item 9. Yes. So I invite members to question the leader and executive members in respect of any matter within their portfolio responsibility in accordance with Council Procedure Rule B11. Please can you address the Lord Mayor with your question, speaking clearly, indicating to which executive member your question is directed. For this section, looking at the number of hands raised, I remind all of us there is a maximum of 15 minutes in total for questions during this session. I'll also just remind members that if any questions which have been put cannot be answered at the meeting, a written reply will be circulated within 5 working days following the meeting. Yes, please do. That will be helpful.
Okay. So we begin with Councillor Nelson.
Okay. We'll begin with Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to ask a question to the executive member for children. As a councillor for Westfield Ward, I was really pleased to see that the first school who will be piloting the free school meals programme was Westfield Primary School. So I just wanted to ask how that kind of decision came to be, that Westfield was the first school, and yeah, what was taken into account in that decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. From the outset, this administration has made a clear commitment to tackling the affordability crisis in York. And I'm sure that members who were here in the last administration will have probably got bored about me banging on about the right to food and food provision. But, you know, we passed several motions in support of that. And it's really close to my heart. This extends to everything that we're going to do, including this policy to mobilise the city to deliver free school meals. And I think on the point of Westfield Primary in particular, it is one of York's largest primary schools. And so we wanted to tackle this issue head on. And in this pilot, it's obvious that we need to stress test certain things, and actually starting with a large primary school is a good idea in that front. It would be wrong of me not to mention as well that one of the reasons that we chose Westfield was, of course, well, we tasked officers, and I want to make that very clear, we tasked officers to look at the various primary schools in York and identify a primary school that serves the greatest need in our city. And in terms of a primary school that serves vulnerable young people and serves them excellently, by the way, Westfield was an obvious candidate. So that is the reason we've started with Westfield for our pilot. I'm really pleased that we're doing so, and I hope that it serves the residents of Chapel Fields in the way that we envisage it. Thank you.
Thank you. You didn't have a supplementary for that, I assume. Are there any? No, then we move on to the next question. Councillor Orrell.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. To Councillor Pavlovich. On the 14th of June, finance officers were asked for details of ward schemes for which funding was allocated and not spent. This request was repeated in July and is now subject to an out-of-time FOI. Can Councillor Pavlovich clarify what is happening and when we can expect this information?
I can't give you an answer on when the FOI is going to be responded to, because that's not my area. In respect to the substantive issue that you were raising, if you want to write to me again, I will get the answer. My understanding that was for schemes that had previously been approved in the last financial year. The understanding we have, and we can clarify that with the statutory 151 officer, is that all schemes that were approved and signed off by officers in the last financial year will be honoured.
Is there a supplementary?
It's supplementary. I was Councillor Pavlovich was looking for information, so
it may be helpful if it's possible to give some reassurance on that.
Can I follow up then, Lord Mayor?
Can respond.
Is there any reason why the statutory officer can't respond? No.
It would depend on them. It would of course depend on whether or not the statutory officer has the information to hand, Lord Mayor. But I will.
Yeah, I haven't got a detailed list of the schemes in front of me, but my understanding is that those schemes that were agreed by officers, as Councillor Pavlovich said, those schemes that were agreed to progress would be honoured, but I haven't got a list of those schemes in front of me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Specific change. I want to follow up, if I may, Lord Mayor.
Please.
At last council, I asked about a specific scheme in North Lane, Huntington, for VAS signs, and I was told then, as you just said, that if it had been approved and agreed, it was agreed in January, and we got the final ward scheme budget spent in March, which included this scheme, and I've been asking for 2 or 3 months as to when it will be installed. Can the executive member find out when it's going to be installed?
Certainly find out when it's going to be installed.
Sorry.
That's what you asked me. Can I find out when it's going to be installed? I'm happy to ask that question when it's going to be installed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't decide when things are going to be installed. That's an officer decision.
Thank you. No further supplementaries. Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In Guildhall Ward, we've got an increasing problem that tenants' legal rights in the private rental sector aren't always upheld. People are being given large rent increases without the proper local legal processes being followed. There are many unlicensed HMOs, and many people are finding that essential repairs aren't being made and basic housing standards aren't being met. When residents' tenancy rights are not adhered to by their landlord, it can be difficult to access legal recourse. It's not a straightforward or accessible process. What is the Executive Member for Housing doing about this important issue, which is a source of huge stress for so many people?
Thank you. Me again. Thank you, Councillor Melly. As you know, yesterday I had a decision session, my second, and at that decision session, we agreed to support Justice for Tenants, which is an organisation that the council will work with to support tenants that are living in HMOs that are either unlicensed or that have poor conditions. And as you know, and as you pointed out, they often find it difficult to challenge those decisions. And Justice for Tenants will work with them, as they do with a number of local authorities, to reclaim rent and that's been paid. And that, we hope, will encourage those unlicensed HMOs, of which we think, but we don't know, because we don't know what we don't know, that there may be up to 800 unlicensed HMOs that have not come forward since the licensing, additional licensing was introduced in April 2023. There was another thing that I wanted to say on that, but I've completely bloody forgotten what it is. So yeah, I'll have to get back to you. I'm completely, ask me a supplementary, and I'm sure I'll remember what it was that I wanted to say about Justice for Tenants. Oh, it's cost neutral to the councils. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Are there supplementaries to that? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I do find it very worrying when you said that there's 800 unrecorded HMOs, which leads me to my supplementary question, quite succinctly. Have you an update for full council as to the progress or otherwise of the review of the HMO supplementary planning document? And is the corporate director fully engaged in driving through the will of full council from December 2021, bearing in mind that the local plan in theory is supposed to report next month?
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Hopefully the local plan will be responded to by the inspectors in time for, we hope, the November full council. And then the SPDs will be following shortly thereafter. I did speak with the what was the forward planning team, which is now the strategic planning team, about the SPDs and particularly about the HMO SPD, and that is progressing and is more likely to be with us sometime in the early new year.
For the sake of the thousands who are watching this on the live stream, supplementary planning documents, SPDs and HMOs, of course, housed in multiple occupancy. Any supplementaries on this? I don't see anybody indicating. Councillor Smalley.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lord Mayor. My question is for Councillor Coles. According to a UK Active survey in November last year, 3/4 of council swimming pools are classified as unsecure, meaning there is a risk of closure or reduced services before March next year. Under Lib Dem leadership, the last administration made waves by building new pools at the community stadium and protecting our other brilliant pools. We also secured investment in pools, such as the new pool covers at Yearsley that have almost already paid for themselves in reduced energy costs. Given that many of the new administration's promises on other vital public services are draining away, please could Councillor Coles prevent this sinking feeling by confirming that all York's public pools will remain open and won't see any cuts during the length of your administration?
Thank you, Councillor Smalley. I have had a number of conversations about leisure and cultural activities across the city, including with the library service, with swimming pools, and with our museums. Everything is incredibly valued across the city. There is absolutely nothing that we would like to do to any of those services. However, the budgetary situation is the budgetary situation, and we do have a £10 million shortfall in year. This is not my portfolio to talk about the finances, and there is certainly no decisions been made about anything to do with swimming pools. I learned to swim at Yearsley Pool, so I can confirm it's cold, and so therefore the swimming covers, I'm sure, are very welcome for those who are swimming there at the moment. And if he would like me to provide him with any more information about the pools in the city, I'm very happy to do that.
Did you have a supplementary?
No, thank you.
Councillor Waters does.
Would Councillor Coles like to elaborate on how much improvement there could be to the city swimming pools with an extra £900,000 a year that is currently going to service the ridiculous loan on the Guildhall?
Thank you, Councillor Waters. That's a fantastic question. I think that that 900,000? That 900,000, I'm sure, would be extremely welcome in any of the leisure, cultural, adult social services, children's services, all the huge areas of challenge in our budget setting for next year. But as it is, we don't have it. So we are where we are.
Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'd also like to ask Councillor Coles about health inequality. It's a really important issue that we're currently facing in the city. It can have a huge range of impact on people's well-being, ranging from factors from life expectancy and onwards. And it was even mentioned earlier in our air quality motion, particularly representing a ward like Fishergate in the centre of the city with a main road in it. I'm very concerned about the health inequality that can happen across the city. And I just want to know what work is being done to make sure that we address this important issue.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. And it is fair to say that health inequality is absolutely at the heart of everything that we're trying to do, along with environment. Oh God, I'm going to forget the list. Affordability and equalities and human rights. Sorry, thank you, Kate. Thank you, Councillor Lomas. This was a subject of one of our Health and Wellbeing Board reports that we discussed this week. The trends are unfortunately across the city getting worse. So that is particularly the case in areas of the highest levels of deprivation. In his Fishergate ward, the gap is currently 11 years for women and 10 years for men. That is completely unacceptable and contrasts starkly with areas of the city that are only a few miles away. We know in terms of drivers and things that we can do about it, we know that smoking is one of the biggest drivers of health inequality. And I would, seeing as you've asked the question, pay tribute to our health trainers who are out there at the moment across the city, have been out every day working with communities in advance of Stoptober to support residents to stop smoking with the free stop smoking service. I recently spent a very early morning at Hazel Court with the team, talking to them about the work that they're doing. And while I was with them, 9 members of council staff signed up to the stop smoking service. So it is a really welcome improvement. We also have our local area coordinators who are doing some really positive work to reduce health inequalities and refer residents into services where we have them. I guess I'd finish with just the fact that our council plan has a core principle around health, and we have got a lot to do, but we are committed to doing as much as we can as an administration to reduce health inequalities in Fishergate and across the city.
Thank you. I'm afraid our time has beaten us. I know there are a number of other questions that members were wanting to ask, but we've had the 15 minutes allocated. Therefore, I have to move on. Thank you, members. We move on to agenda item 10. Written report by Councillor Webb, Executive Member for Children, Young People and Education, set out in the council papers. So I invite members to question Councillor Webb on his written report. Councillor Fisher. We have 10 minutes to do this. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have given Councillor Webb some prior notice to this question. Given that there's a raft of research evidence that young people who do not have access to a proper breakfast have reduced learning outcomes in the morning due to poor concentration levels and inability to participate fully in activities due to nutrient deficiency, and taking the highly informed comments of local head teachers outlined on page 48, I welcome the fact that there are going to be some breakfast club extensions as trialed as well. But the question I would ask is, what metrics will you use to decide whether the breakfast club is superior to lunches or vice versa?
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. And by prior warning, he told me in passing in the break time. So I've not had a huge amount. But yes, I think it is a valid question. The reason that we are looking at this as a pilot project is because if we were to click our fingers, if suddenly the money became available and we clicked our fingers and provided everything for everybody all at once, I'm pretty certain head teachers would not thank us for that, because that would be a big change in a very short space of time, which is why we're taking the approach we are. And in the pilot project, this gives us an opportunity to test different things out. So yes, you're right, head teachers have been in touch with officers to say that potentially a breakfast offer might be a better way of going. And I'm happy to take that on board as advice. And I think that it's something that we're going to look at and see what does work best. In terms of metrics, I think for this whole project, there's several things to think about. There is, of course, the sustainability. We want to make sure that if we do this right. That will be forefront to anything we're trying to achieve here. I think as well as that, there is something around maybe a softer approach in terms of how does it make children and families feel that they are now receiving, there's not that stigma attached to not having the food in the first place. Specifically on breakfasts, I remain open at the moment to actually looking at what the measurements we would actually take day to day would be. And on that, we have been working with the University of York to discuss with them how they could help us implement this and how they could help us monitor this. Because again, we know that, we're not the experts in this. It's our job to mobilize the city and listen to feedback, work with partners, see what we can do and see what is best for the young people. Because fundamentally, that is what we want to achieve out of this. We want to achieve improvements, outcomes for young people.
Councillor Cuthbertson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. First of all, can I congratulate Councillor Webb on his appointment to lead member. It's a role which I enjoyed myself for 3 years. And while it's hard work, it's enormously privileging. So congratulations, I wish you well. Also, I'd like to offer congratulations to young people, officers and outside organisations where appropriate, who've contributed to a very positive report on care leaver services from Ofsted. But returning to my question, which is actually about free school meals, I'm tempted to make a comparison with the Early Talk for York project, which is mentioned on page 49 and 50 as having received an MJ award. Early Talk for York, by contrast, was based on at least 10 years research in America and Canada as to how such a project might work and had worked, in their local environments. It still took us, when we knew that the support was in place from external organisations and from organisations within the city, took 3.5 years before it could be rolled out across the city. And it is making the difference that we anticipated. However, what worries me and concerns me slightly is the mentions on page 48 in paragraphs 2, 3 and 4 of what are effectively trial approaches. I'd like to know what research that's already extant those projects are based on.
Apologies, Councillor Cuthbertson. Can you just, that last sentence again? I just missed that and that seemed important. Sorry.
I said that I have some concerns about the wording on page 48 in paragraphs 2, 3 and 4 about what are essentially trial projects in some of the city's schools. And I'm worried that despite the promises that are made in the election campaign, actually, now that we're 4 months into a 48-month electoral cycle, we may or may not reach the target in the period that we're given, because that would be enormously damaging to the promises that you've made.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbertson. And yes, I'd agree with you. It's an amazing privilege to be in this role. To start with your first point, and you know, thank you for your work in the role, and also for Councillor Orrell's work in the role, and for Councillor Waller's work in the role. I think it was a team effort, and it's always welcome because it is a big portfolio. And thank you also for mentioning the improvements that we're seeing with Ofsted and with the care leavers service. Thank you as well for what you mentioned about early talk for York. I know that this is something that started in the last administration, and I think it was a good effort, and actually in a budget amendment that the administration knocked back a few years back, the Labour group actually wanted to do double funding for it a year earlier, and that didn't happen. But I'm glad that it's really progressed well. On your substantive question that we got to, in terms of research, you know, this is something that there have been people working on free school meals across Europe for a long time. There have been organisations in London, for example, boroughs in London that have been doing this for 10 years, and actually it's become a core part of their service. I've spoken to councils in Blackpool, going back to the previous question that Councillor Fisher raised about breakfasts that they've been running. We've been speaking to all of these organisations. As I said, I've been working with the University of York, we've worked with the University of Sheffield to date on auto-enrolment. So we've looked at different aspects of the research that is available, and we are not rushing into this. And I do, you know, it would be wrong to say that I don't share your concerns that will we get there? Will the city get there? But we are committed to mobilising the city to deliver on those free school meals. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank council officers, school leaders, members of the clergy even, members of businesses, members of our community are already contributing to this mobilisation, both with the support, both financial, but also, importantly, their understanding of the city. And that's a really big part of this, and will be part of any successes that this policy has. It will be hard. I'm not going to say it's not going to be. Of course, it will be hard, and you will know that, of course. But let's not make, what I'd really like to say here and now is, let's please not make the goodwill of our residents a political football. This is something that I hope we can work together on over time. So thanks for your question, thanks for your support, and let's do all we can to move on this forward. Thank you.
Supplementary, Lord Mayor.
You can ask a supplementary.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation, Councillor Webb, and I would wholeheartedly support the points that you make. I just wonder whether the task of galvanising the city to support the laudable aims of this project would be made easier if members of the Liberal Democrat group were actually actively out there in the city also speaking to the people that they know and the parts of the civic society that we're trying to engage with and getting support from already, and whether or not that might make this a more deliverable project rather than 4 months into an administration taking every opportunity to try to diminish the aims of the project, try to unpick the ambition that this administration has for the city, and whether that may create problems further down the line.
Thank you, Councillor Crusher. I'll just start by just correcting myself slightly. I said we've been working with the University of Sheffield. We've been working with Sheffield Council on auto enrolments. That was a mistake on my part, sorry. On your question, look, the opposition over there have a right and a duty to scrutinise policies that we want to produce. And I think that is fundamental to our democracy, isn't it? And I don't mind that so much. And I actually think that the questions that have been raised previously are good examples of that. And I'd also say Councillor Mason's question earlier on was another good example of that. Where I do struggle is the constant attack on why haven't you done it straight away? Because I think that, I spoke to a head teacher today about this and how that they want this to be implemented properly. They would love this to happen, but they don't want it to be rushed into. They want this process to work and to stick. And I think we all want that across the city. And I just take this opportunity to say to everyone in this room, if you know people who we could work with on this project, then we would welcome those conversations. I think that there are lots of people in this room, and before the election even, we had members from across the chamber saying that this is a good idea, let's try and work together on this. And I hope that that can continue, because we shouldn't make this a political football. This is hungry children. We want to do everything we can to support those people. Fundamentally, it's a shame that we need to be trying to do things like this. We all got to agree on that. But until we get a change in approach from national politics, then this is where we are right now. And we're going to do everything we can to support the most vulnerable. Thank you.
I think members will realise that's already taken us over our 10 minutes, unfortunately, Councillor Hollier. Therefore, we move on to item 11, the report of the Chair of Corporate Services, Climate Change and Scrutiny Management Committee. I invite Councillor Fenton, Chair of the Corporate Services, Climate Change and Scrutiny Management Committee, to move receipt of his report set out in our papers for this evening. Councillor Fenton.
Formally moved, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. May I have a seconder? Thank you. Does anybody wish to debate the report, or is council happy to agree? I take that as happy to agree. Yes? Thank you. That being the case, I think we can move on to the next item. The next item being item 13, Hessay Parish Council, the use of reserved powers of Principal Council. So I invite Councillor Douglas to move the recommendations contained in the report set out in the council papers related to the use of reserve powers to appoint councillors Hook and Knight to the aforesaid Parish Council. Councillor Douglas.
Moved, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. May I have a seconder for this?
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cobain. Again, does anybody wish to debate the recommendations, or is council happy to approve the proposal? We've agreed. Thank you. So we can move on to the next item. Item 15, appointments and changes to membership. There are just some tweaks to this. Could I ask you to just clarify those tweaks before we move on?
Yes, there are a couple of alterations to the list as circulated. One of which is to add the addition of Councillor Douglas as council leader to the York Health and Care Partnership. And the next one is to replace Councillor Stewart, who's currently indicated on the papers as the Conservative representative on the local plan steering group with Councillor Rowley. Thank you.
Is there agreement from members? Members are happy with this. We don't need to debate it, or I'm sure. Agreed. Thank you, members. Well, I have no further urgent business. So that concludes the meeting this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lord.